Not much, man. Sorry I gotta do this, but here's your 2 checks, man.
Really?
Yeah, man.
Why?
It ain't working out. We tried everything we could, but you gotta let you go,
All right.
man.
All right, whatever.
All right? No hard feelings, right?
Yeah. Just to let you know, I know the real reason.
What's the real reason?
Because every Friday I go to show and tell and get a lap dance by your fucking daughter. That's why.
You know, I don't need to hear that fucking shit from you, man. Really?
Well, that's why I'm getting laid off. It has nothing to do with my fucking work.
You know what? Grab your shit and get the fuck off my job.
I am, and guess where I'm going? Guess where I'm going? Show and fucking tell.
Enjoy it, motherfucker.
Yeah, oh, I will. I'll enjoy that fat ass she got. Is that where we're going right now?
Affirmative, on my way.
Right. Oh, so like, with Alex Smith from the 20th century. I'm not going to do a formal introduction. I'm not going to do the whole way you do an intro, like the whole. You always have that introduction. I always love. In a world of chaos, political influence.
Are we on?
Yeah. I'm just fucking around. Okay. Yeah, you were asking me like what's been going on in New York, I guess, since I've been back.
I was just going to ask you specifically about what's going on with the refugee, quote unquote, resettlements that have been pretty publicly broadcast on Twitter, at least, probably not by the mainstream, but is the government actually housing like tens of thousands of these randos from around the world? And is it displacing anyone from New York? And is the budget actually kind of going lopsided and out of control? Because
there was a story in the New York Post about a firefighter losing his job due to budget cuts to offset some of the costs to house and feed and give medical care to these migrants. Guy, I guess, from losing his job, having like 2 or 3 kids.
Wow.
Marine vet also. He died of a heart attack, I guess, just from the stress. That was in the New York Post this week. As far as the refugees are concerned, it's interesting. Earlier this week, I had to take the subway to get to work, and I work in a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood, and it's all Hispanic.
But when you say Hispanic, okay, so like it's a little different.
It's Mexicans, Dominicans, and Colombians.
No Puerto
and the
Ricans.
Colombians have, I guess, made their money and started moving out of this neighborhood. So it's not as it was Colombian from like probably like the mid 70s up until maybe the past 10 years. And now the Mexicans have taken over. And the Dominicans have always been there. They've been there since, I guess, the 80s when the Italians and Germans moved out to Long Island or New Jersey.
Right.
So I get off the subway. And it's a good 4-block walk, and I do this subway trip every 3 or 4 months because I usually just drive into work. But I was like, I had to do something, or there's problem with my car, I can't recall. And so I'm walking along, and I see these black guys, and I'm not talking like blacks like we know. I'm talking these guys are dark as night, and I just stopped.
Ebony.
Dude, they like if it man, I've honest to God, I've never seen someone so black in my life. So I just stopped and I just had to talk to him. I go, please, I need to know where you're from. Senegal. And I'm like, Senegal, like, oh wow, welcome to New York City. I was like trying to get some information out of him, but he didn't speak any English. I go, how's your English? He goes, I don't speak English, I speak French. And I'm like, I just start laughing. I go, well, dude, you are in the wrong neighborhood to be speaking French, not let alone the wrong country, the wrong neighborhood. And he's trying to sell like knockoff Nikes in the streets to these people that are like 4 foot nothing. This guy was like 6'7", 6'8". Yeah. He had to have been about 20 years old. He was a kid. And you can see he was kind of like apprehensive about talking to me and stuff. So I kind of like just parted ways. But it was interesting because it was like him and 3 or 4 other guys just walking up and down the street trying to sell AirPods and sneakers, little like Bluetooth boom boxes, like things that they can carry in their backpack to try to just barter or sell for something. So that was kind of That's the migrant crisis. So they're kind of like there's these black guys walking around and a shit ton of Peruvians. I mean, we're just inundated with Peruvians now, and you can tell they're Peruvian because of their clothes they're wearing. Very ethnic. I don't know if you're familiar with like Peruvian
Yeah,
people
yeah,
at all,
yeah,
but
yeah,
they
yeah,
wear
yeah.
these funky hats. They wear a lot of colorful
Colorful.
clothes. They look more Indian, Native American, indigenous look to
I
them.
think they're called Indios. Yeah, it's a different sort of ethnic group.
Right. So it's like they're from like the mountains of Peru.
Right, right.
So I see some a dozen or so guys from Africa and just an army of Peruvians. That's been my experience. As far as like what's going on inside New York City, I have no idea. I never really venture into Manhattan that often because it's
So you're just in the boroughs most of the time. You're not actually going into quote unquote the city.
no. The reason being is it's overpriced. Everything, the
Yeah.
quality has dropped tenfold post COVID, and everything's
Okay.
expensive.
Yeah.
Certain parts of Manhattan have taken a turn for the worse. Chelsea district, like the meatpacking area, NoHo, Soho, like that whole the air quote gentrified areas that you would expect to see women with doggies are just absolute fucking dumps now. A lot of just college kids.
What
Just
happened? Like why did it decline like that? I mean, people just weren't living in Manhattan anymore and they weren't frequenting the establishments to keep those businesses afloat, or like
well, no one. Here's
what's
the
driving
thing:
them
no
down?
one actually lives in Manhattan. It's college kids.
Hmm.
It's impoverished immigrants. It's people in rent control apartments that have been there for 100 years that just pass down the apartments to their relatives. And then you have the managerial elite who you don't necessarily see. They won't be taking the subway. At best, they'll have Uber or a private driver. So
Hmm.
you have these college kids with college kids with mommy and daddy's money who just get shit faced and don't necessarily know where they're going to wake up the next morning.
Hmm.
So there's like a little bit of a college party town atmosphere that I don't necessarily remember when I was that age. Like there was
Hmm.
maybe obviously Chelsea district, but at that time when I graduated high school, Chelsea district was still
Yeah.
like the meatpacking district was just winding down when I graduated high school. So you started seeing flares of that. But when I went there more recently to meet up with some friends or whatever, um, I was with my girlfriend and we're like, yo, we gotta get the fuck out of here. Like, what is this? A bunch of 21, 22-year-old kids
Yeah.
just, puking in the street. Like it was a Sunday at 12 o'clock.
Where is this? Is this close to the campus? I know like NYU and Columbia, I think, are in
Those are
Manhattan. And
far.
then
Those are more north.
okay,
This experience is more in like
City
Greenwich Village
College.
area.
Okay.
So it's like
But but you
southern
could
parts of Manhattan.
okay, okay. I don't know who's like the party school person in going to school in New York. Like, is that from another like city college or outside of the city, or are they coming just from uptown? Or I don't know. I don't know if you know.
Yeah, they're
Just
probably
curious.
mostly uptown because there's nothing really. In my experience, I don't necessarily know like what's cool uptown. Um, just like my again, I'm not like I don't going to Manhattan's a pain in the ball sack, and like I said, there's really not much. I've already seen it, done it. I find I'm like, oh, I'm on this street again. I was here like fucking 5 years ago. So
Okay.
it's small. Manhattan's really small. Um, so like where I would personally like to hang out is Upper East Side. So it's a little bit more. I don't call it suburbia, but people are more people that actually live and work in Manhattan
Yeah,
and
those
are
are
from
that's like
Manhattan are from there.
houses
It's a little bit
are
more
there,
affordable, air
condos
quote
and stuff.
affordable compared to the rest of Manhattan. Where the
Okay.
college kids tend to hang out again is Greenwich Village, NoHo, Soho, even Hell's Kitchen now is kind of getting gentrified, which is weird because that was always like a dump.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
but if you were like to go into the subway, dude, you're like you're getting sized up. Like if you're going on a train that's connected to the Bronx in any way possible, like if that subway train is going to the Bronx, you're the more frequent you're going to do it, the more likely you're going to experience some crazy shit. So if I wore a suit and tie and I'm on a train connected to not Harlem, the Bronx, you're risking it. Like, so don't be wearing anything expensive. Don't be flashy or showy. Kind of dress like them and just look like you're a person who's willing to commit murder. That's my best advice.
I think last time I was in New York, I was meeting somebody in Manhattan, and I got on a station outside the city, and I'm not from New York, so I didn't really, know exactly what to do. I was just sort of like looking for signs and like reading instructions. But there's this pack of youths, as if anybody's seen my
Feral
cousin Vinny.
basketball Americans.
Youths, my cousin Vinny style, but yeah, they probably play basketball too. But no, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. And they were just hanging out, and they're like, like 7 of them doing jack shit. And they one of them sees me like looking at the ticket purchase place, and he comes over and is like, "Oh, yo, man, like, hey, what can I do?" It's like, "Hey guys, I'm just trying to get a ticket." And then he just kept like doing this like jive bullshit, and I'm like, all right guys, like, and then I basically just like leave. And then I go under the tracks and I go up the other side to where there's another ticket, the wrong side mind you, but like I just didn't want to deal with these guys. And then I just went in, and then I left. But it was that was the only real vibrancy experience I had on the subway. I didn't really see too much. In the 80s, like they had, like the cars were like famous for like getting graffitied like all the time. Like every single car had like some huge tag on it. I think that stopped, but I mean every
clean every time they get tagged. Now they get clean. It's digressing real quick. So you're talking about graffiti. What's crazy now? Get this, since the post COVID, and the whole, I guess, I don't know what you want to call it, communist takeover. I don't know what you want to call these people that are running city council. But since they decriminalized a lot of like the whole broken window policies of Giuliani, so graffiti's making a comeback. What's interesting though is that the people tagging and doing the graffiti were all the people back in the 70s that did it.
Okay, how do you know
So all
that?
these tags
It's
that
like
are popping
old
up
guys?
are all guys that are like 50s and 60-year-old guys.
Do people like filming this? How do they know they're old guys? I mean, it's
Because all the people that I like kind of associated with were they rough and tumble, working class guys, and like we're driving around, and they're like, "Oh, get the fuck out of here! That guy's tagging again! Holy shit!" And I go, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "That guy hasn't tagged since the 80s. He's back." So
funny.
like so when we're driving up and down the BQE. I don't expect any of my listeners know what the BQE is. Brooklyn Queens Expressway. So it's this expressway that runs parallel to Manhattan. So if you're driving and you look you look westward, you'll see Manhattan, and it connects to the Queensboro Bridge, 59th Street Bridge, Manhattan Bridge. You get onto the Brooklyn Bridge. You can get into Manhattan using this expressway. So we're driving along the BQE, and what's really nice, and it's a very pleasant view. If for any of you who are familiar with New York or would like to see New York, definitely take a ride on the BQE. It's a great experience. You see all the row houses of Brooklyn that kind of peek over the BQE, so you can look into people's like living rooms and kitchens as you go along the BQE. And so as we're driving along the BQE, you see all the billboards tagged by whoever. I don't know. I don't actually know any of the names, but as we're driving up and down it, we're seeing all the tags, and predominantly they were done by people that used to tag when it was prevalent in New York City. Because I don't think necessarily youth, one is, I don't know if they actually even know how to do graffiti properly, and two, to get to these locations, you have to be somewhat of like a veteran in crime and in petty theft, and not petty theft, but petty bullshit. Like, how are you able to climb over fences? How do you dangle your friend over the side of the building, so on and so forth. So I don't necessarily think any of the youth today have any idea how to do that. So that's why you're seeing this renaissance of guys that are in their 50s and 60s doing graffiti now.
What's funny is every time I go to buy spray paint, they ask me how old I am because it's a ridiculous question. I mean, I have I have facial hair, and it's like, okay, but the the whole point is like you can't be under 18 to buy spray paint, and it's obviously because kids are doing graffiti, but um, I just think kids are just like spoiled, with like Amazon, like they can't even solve a basic problem like this. So,
Exactly. You have to be somewhat. You have to like know, be a little street savvy to do a lot of these type of things. You're talking about the youths that you bumped into on the subway. Well, a lot of the time, what they're trying to do is they want your Metro card because you're leaving 25 cents on it. If you're a tourist, let's say, you're leaving. So if you're connecting to get to JFK Airport, you're not going to use your Metro card again. So a lot of people that are unemployed, mostly black, will ask you for your Metro card because there's 25 cents, a dollar, maybe $5 left on it. So they can
okay.
go cash that in and get some dollars for it.
All right. Well, that's like recycling aluminum cans off the side of the highway. You're not going to get much for your time, but I guess they got nothing else to do.
Yeah, they'll do it right in front of police. I did God, I did a live stream maybe like 2 years ago because I was on before COVID. I was always on the subway getting to work, and to get to Manhattan from JFK Airport, you have to connect to Jamaica Queens. And for anybody that knows what Jamaica Queens is, that's where 50 Cent comes from. A lot of other famous rappers, predominantly like Diplomats, 40 Cal, all these type of guys, rough and tumble type of rappers all stem from this hood. And keep in mind, Donald Trump also comes from Jamaica Queens, but he comes from Jamaica Estates, a little bit different. But I digress. So it's just so funny seeing these like Europeans like getting onto the subway at Jamaica, where it's homeless people, crackheads, schizophrenics, people whipping their dicks out, taking a fucking piss, and and there they are with their like fanny packs and expensive luggage. Vlagen dagen Dyson dugan and I was like, God, man, welcome to New York. This is your first experience is Jamaica Queens, and it's like, wow, that is
Yeah.
not a good impression for your
It's
for your
not,
first
but
taste.
I think for tourists, it's kind of entertaining, frankly, because they don't have to deal with it. And a lot of them still put the rose-colored glasses on. It's like, oh,
Oh, I'd be
diversity, blah, blah, blah.
petrified
And,
if they actually knew what the hell they got themselves into.
yeah.
That I guess being naive and not knowing what the hell is going on, you're better off. But anyone with firing synapses and did some research on where you're going to be
Yeah, yeah.
connecting the air train to the subway to get to Midtown Manhattan, you're it's an
I
experience.
understand, and I find it embarrassing. But my point was, I think a lot of these, like the girls who go to Morocco and get their heads cut off, but they think it's entertaining. They think it's fun. They think it's interesting. They're going there for the sights. That is unlike where they're coming from. At least 10 years ago. These days Sweden looks like God knows what, Somalia or something. But it's exciting. Basically, it's exciting.
It is, yeah,
Especially when
no
it's young.
doubt. I've never had any altercations working in the city or really being in New York as a whole. I've never, stupid teenage shit when I was younger. But I don't know if you're a fit guy and look quasi intimidating. No one's gonna mess with you. I mean, maybe some. I'm not gonna beef myself up or whatever, but people say, you have a very intimidating look. I go, it's just the sunken in Italian, dark circles under my eyes that make me look intimidating. I'm not necessarily an intimidating person, but
Yeah,
as long as
and
you
don't
can
forget
sit there,
that
mind your own
giant
business on the
scar running
train.
down the center of your face, and the bullet holes. And just kidding.
Right, right. Just look like you just look like you're a guy on your last you just had it. Like as long as you look like that, no one's really gonna mess with you.
Yep.
What's interesting about the whole situation, like you brought up the Moroccans and I'm not the Moroccans. What were the two Dutch two Dutch girls. Oh no,
I don't
two
know.
girls from Denmark who went to Morocco.
Yeah,
I covered that a
something
long
like
time
that.
ago. There was a story, I don't know if you saw this story, about a woman from Spain whose mother had passed away, and she had an apartment in a high-end building. She goes to the apartment, and there were squatters in the apartment, and she was murdered and stuffed into luggage. That was a recent story about a month ago. So the big talk in town is obviously the situation with squatters, people taking up residency into either apartments or homes that don't belong to them. So between that woman getting killed, and then there's this huge story going on in the news about this woman whose home's worth like 1.1 million, but it's a dump. It's in a not in a nice neighborhood, and she got arrested for trying to kick squatters out. And the squatters in the house were, I don't know, failed actors or were trying to be musicians. They were like young. They were Hispanic. I don't know their ethnic background, but Jose Lopez, aspiring musician, uh, took up a residency in a home. And it's interesting because with the way the law works in New York State, and a little bit has a little bit more teeth in New York City. If you show like you're getting an electricity bill or a cell phone bill sent to that home, you can show that as proof that it is your home. You can make up some bullshit lease that some like a real estate license, like someone with a real estate license or an expired real estate license made the lease up, whatever, and you show that to the cops, and the cops are like, "Oh, there you go. I mean, there's evidence that he belongs here," and then the homeowner is like, "Well, no, I didn't sign that lease. He just decided to start getting mail sent to this home. That shouldn't be enough proof, but it actually is."
I don't know how it happened when Giuliani was ironically doing his broken windows policy, which was about fixing broken windows. Now it seems to be going 180 degrees. But what was the sort of backing for him to do that? The impetus? I assumed it was always the business elites that were tired of losing money on their real estate deals, and they wanted to clean the city up. But what is going on now? And is there going to be a resurgence of that sentiment, or is it going to be a continuation of this Mayor Adams nonsense and being a sanctuary city but complaining about it?
Well, I will say Adams is light years better than De Blasio. I mean, De Blasio.
He was bad. Yeah,
De,
it
De
doesn't really
Blasio
shock
makes
me.
the mayor from Jaws look like a saint. Like serious, like no joke. De Blasio was that bad, and I think
Can you be specific though? Like what policies or what did he not do simply that made it such a problem for New York?
well,
'Cause I didn't like what he said, and I know the cops didn't like him, but what exactly did he do? Is really
okay, I'll
what.
give you a good example. New York
Okay.
City cops can now be sued personally if they were to, hurt someone or
Okay.
kill someone.
Got it. Okay, so the
So
policing has gotten
that's
really
like
tough.
that would be the crown
Okay.
jewel, I think, is
Okay.
of his tenure as being mayor. He ran unopposed. There was no one necessarily running against him. I don't even know the name of who ran against him. I think the one woman from Sex and the City, but I think that maybe that she was
You
running.
serious?
Yeah, the
Oh
dyke,
my
the
God.
redheaded dyke who looks like a giraffe. She ran.
Yeah,
I don't
I
know if she
know who
ran
you're
against
talking
De
about.
Blasio or Adams. I can't recall, but she
Oh.
made a push for City Hall. And as far as like a Republican, going up against them, I couldn't. I have no idea. But De Blasio, De Blasio actually had some ideas that made a lot of sense, but was shot down by Cuomo. One of them that stands out, talking real estate, because that's my that's usually like the meat of most of my talking points for obviously with my listeners. De Blasio wanted to tax any foreign national who bought an apartment and didn't live in New York City like 80%,
Wow.
to try to bring down housing costs because he thought it was out of control with foreign investment, just buying up these apartments or a swath of apartments and never living in them.
Those needle condos, those weird things that
Mhm.
have been going up, those weren't there when I was there. I'm just blown away by how bizarre those things appear. I understand like why they're selling, because it's like the person who actually lives in it gets a 360 view, which is kind of interesting. But I don't know, they kind of look strange for the city.
Well, the needles are they're a new phenomenon. There's going to definitely be more of them. So De Blasio, he tried pushing that. Cuomo shot him down. I think De Blasio just became kind of like petty and just decided to start attacking, low level crime, decriminalizing low level crimes, taking away what was it called? Where stop and search. So
Yeah,
I think it was under Giuliani and Bloomberg carried the torch. Where look, if stop and frisk, that's what it was called. So like if which is if you really think about it, is kind of like not really constitutional. You can't just start randomly searching, stereotyping someone and just grabbing him and going through his pockets. I think that's kind of in some way kind of twisted, but it made sense. So he De Blasio rolled that back, and then obviously during COVID, all bets were off and was off to the races for
and
I guess.
BLM was going big time during that too. So he's got like a black wife, I think, and so he was all about that.
Well, do you
Which
know anything
probably
about his daughter?
no. No, I try to not waste time on things
You
like
don't.
that. So,
It's bad.
tell me,
It's bad.
catch
Oh,
me up.
it's she's biracial, an absolute
Yeah.
fucking mess.
Okay.
Mess. Anarchy tattoos, bald head.
Oh, no.
She's repulsive. Physically looking at her, she's repulsive, and I guess she kind of just embraced it. And she was out there with BLM, just just breaking a bunch of shit. And there's a photo. I'll send it to you of
You don't have
De
to.
Blasio's daughter.
You
Just
don't
I
have
think
to.
high on drugs on the subway, where like her tits hanging out and her
You
eyeballs
know
hanging
what?
out of her head.
I'm gonna let you hold on to that one for me. I'm good.
So so and De Blasio had a hard on for taking the horses, the carriages that roll around Central Park.
Right. Yeah.
I'm
I know
saying
those.
he painted it
Those are
like
racist too.
but it's racist, it's inhumane.
You're kidding,
How can
right?
you
What?
treat the
I was
horses this
joking. So
way?
what is?
Because where the horses are stabled at night, the property is worth, you know,
Oh,
billions, I guess, in a
why didn't you just
nutshell.
say that? Why didn't you just say that? That would actually make
Because then
sense.
you can't, well, you can't say that because then the outlash, because then he'll receive backlash from his cohorts, which is,
Uh,
feminist and PETA and, some NGO for climate change.
It's interesting. So it's sort of like it's like a get out of jail free card. It's like you use literally the race card or whatever the cause du jour to immunize yourself from political attack. It's quite clever. I don't think like a politician because I don't like to lie to people, but the tactic is interesting.
It's brilliant. I don't see Adams really necessarily doing anything like that per se. He's done a good job distancing himself from De Blasio, but and at least he's from New York. I don't even know if De Blasio's from New York. I know that's not even his
I
name.
don't know.
That's his last name is Van Housen or Van Stubenstein.
Yeah, it's some kind of German name. Yeah.
Right, and he put, I guess, making his name sound more ethnic. He was trying to win over the Hispanic and Italian vote. Um, but yeah, De Blasio also tried rolling out. I don't think he got anywhere with this, but he wanted to implement the whole Swedish model of incarceration. And this was his backdoor way of emptying Rikers Island. So, and
Hmm.
again, that was a real estate deal because Rikers Island is worth so much. If you were to develop Rikers Island,
So this guy sounds like a crook. I mean, is he like in the
yeah, of
pocket
course.
of real estate developers? Like, what's going on? And who
Mhm.
are they? Like, who are his donors? Is this public knowledge? Seems like that would be
Yeah,
disclosed?
there's again, it's been a while. I used to follow this WordPress. Some Brooklynite would just pull articles, and you have a bunch of hyperlinks to who's behind what and how it all ties in. And this is like 4 or 5 years ago. I don't necessarily remember what the people that played behind a lot of this, but a lot of the HB1V, is it H1B1 visa, where if
Yeah.
you
Lots
yeah,
of high
so
tech.
a lot of that, a lot of Chinese money came pouring in under De
Right.
Blasio. The Yeah, so the Rikers Island thing was interesting. So again, the backdoor trying to empty Rikers Island and bring it in the Swedish model, which was interesting. So the whole Swedish model, and I don't necessarily know too much about it. Maybe you know a little bit more about it. He was thinking about giving like a tax incentive to homes that would be willing to house people from Rikers Island as a way of domesticating the criminal.
Wow. I don't know anything about that in Sweden. I just know that getting an apartment in Stockholm is quite arduous, and they do have a very strange like public lottery. Then there's a private sector as well, and so every time the government steps on the market, it gets kind of bizarre and confusing. But they do a lot of weird stuff over there. I don't know anything about the prison release catch and release
What's
program
that
or
guy?
whatever they call
I
it.
know it's not Sweden, but what is it? The killer in Norway is it?
Oh, Anders Breivik.
Oh, dude, he's always saying you didn't give. What
Is
was the
he out
latest?
now? That happened a long time ago. Is he
No,
out? Like,
he's still in jail. He was just in the news
he's still playing
recently
his
that
PlayStation?
he's yeah, the place.
Well,
You
first
didn't
of all,
give me a
he trained to
PS3.
do that on a PlayStation, and then they gave him a PlayStation while he was in jail, which I thought was like the most ironic thing.
Well, he
But that's what they
complained it
did.
was a PS2. He wanted a PS3.
Yeah, you want to meet hard Nordic criminals.
Right. So what people don't necessarily understand about Rikers is a prison that you're only doing like 2, maximum 5 years. When you're doing that type of time, it's it's like a baboon logic where I guess you have to up one another because you're going to be out in 2 to 5 years. So once you hit the streets, your street cred is based on what you did in Rikers, right? Like if you got sent to Sing Sing or Attica, upstate New York, you're there for like 20, 30 years.
Okay.
You can't be acting like a fucking moron up there
So
because
those
you're
still
there for 20,
exist?
30
I just
years.
know them from movies, like and Rikers too. But like the Sinks, Attica was like that movie, right? Dog Day Afternoon or
Hmm.
something. But that's around still. Like they
Yeah,
didn't
for
close.
sure.
Really?
Yeah, Sing Sing and Attica are still around. And when you get sent upstate, you're gonna be doing time. You're not going to Rikers. So there's a disconnect. Like if you're going to upstate, it can be any prison upstate. It doesn't necessarily be Sing Sing, Attica. Those are only two that popped in my head just because of pop culture. But you can't necessarily be getting into scuffles like you can in Rikers. If you get in scuffles in Rikers, it's street cred. You get into scuffles in Sing Sing, well, you're going in a black hole for the next
Yeah.
3 months,
Okay.
and you have to
So those
be
are prisons. So Rikers
right.
is like jail. It's like a
Yes,
holding tank for the troublesome youth, and then
right.
they
So if you're going
figure
to
out what they're going
empty
to do.
if you're going to empty Rikers out, and you have this liberal couple who's getting a huge tax break on their townhouse, right? Oh, let him in. He's we're all the same color on the inside.
Wow.
Obviously, I don't think it went anywhere. But there was a huge public backlash, maybe like 5 or 6 years ago about it. So
Yeah, I don't know if I'd sign up for that. I mean, maybe if I had like a panic room or something, I'd put them in. But yeah, I don't.
like
Anyway,
going back to like the whole like boots on the ground report, seeing a shit ton of out of state plates, mostly from Texas, and from the gist of it, it's people from the border. So they just
Hmm.
hop in a beater,
Yeah.
like a fucking 30-year-old Nissan Pathfinder. It's all like a rust bucket, and
Okay.
it's it's like full of people from the border. Hang on, I'm getting a phone call. Let me turn this off. I gotta put this silent. All right. My apologies. So there's a lot of cars from out of state, mostly from the south. One being the whole situation at the border. The other situation is that Florida, for example, has a policy that if you wanted to go on the dole, you have to do a drug test. In New York, you don't need a drug test. And obviously the dole's much fatter in New York. So you're getting a lot of people from out of state trying to go on welfare in New York because there's so many programs available to everyone. It's not necessarily based on skin color. I mean, you can be a white dude who's poor and get a room to rent as long as you show proof that you're making under a certain amount of dollars. And it's kind of tied into Section 8, but not. I don't necessarily know the
Do you know?
work
You don't have
going.
to cite it specifically, but do you know the rough threshold of like what qualifies you for assisted housing? Like, what income level do you have to be below? Would you estimate?
It's based on the family size. So
Right.
if you're a
Okay.
single
Single,
dude, I would imagine
it's single.
threshold's about 20,000, and for a family, I think it's 40,000.
To even contemplate living in New York and make less than 20 grand a year, I mean, it's boggles my mind. It's like I would, stab myself or flee the city, and in shame before I would get on the dole. But that's the problem. It's like the people that take advantage of it don't feel that way. So you have
Well,
these
the
horribly misaligned
Hispanics
incentives.
don't like it. Like Hispanics feel it's an insult. The overrunning majority of Hispanics do
Yeah.
not want to take a government handout. They
Yeah,
will.
yeah, but they're happy to go to the emergency room when they
Well,
get,
of
get the
course. I mean, come
sniffles.
on. Yeah.
It's-
Well, that's why there's so many urgent cares now. I don't know what it's like by you,
yes,
but the
yes,
urgent
yes, I
care
know.
was a
Yes, yes,
reaction
yes.
to the overrunning majority of people who go into the emergency room for the sniffles.
That's crazy. Um, so it really is like Mexico now. I mean, for people who are from the South and the West Coast, I mean, like Mexico was just dominating the Hispanic population. But I always thought like New York was more Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, all those types. But and I don't know if Cubans are there, but people, from like the Caribbean mainly. And it's interesting that Mexicans are up there now.
Yeah,
There's
it's a shit ton of Mexicans now, shit tons, man. And because there's so much conflict with between Mexicans and El Salvadorians, the El Salvadorians moved further eastward to middle parts of Long Island. So you won't see Mexicans out on Long Island, but you'll see El Salvadorians and Hondurans because the Mexicans can't stand them. And the Mexicans filled the vacuum left behind by Colombians that have kind of ascended to Americana. Yeah, basically, the Colombians are where the Italians were 20 years ago or 30 years ago.
Hmm.
If that makes sense, if you can
I
kind
sort
of
of.
grasp that
I
concept.
didn't know there were that many though. I mean, Italian Americans are tens of millions. Colombians are what, a million? I mean, I don't know. Just guessing. Maybe in New York.
So
It's like,
there's 7 million Italian or people that identify as Italian in the United States, and they tend to
that's
be
all. Okay.
yeah.
Hmm.
It's not as many as I mean, that's what Wiki said like last time I checked, because
Okay.
I was looking it up, like how many Italian Americans actually live in America. I think well, they're all mostly New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, Connecticut. But I'm getting off
Yeah.
the point. Point being is that yeah, it's now a bunch of Guatemalans with a baby and a towel wrapped and strapped to the back of some really like obese fucking woman, man. They're so
Yeah.
fat. They're so
Um.
fucking fat, man. They are
Yeah.
huge.
I know. I don't understand like what happens when you reach a certain demographic or industrialization point, but have you ever seen like how Indian women get when they get slightly affluent? They I'm
Just
not
let
trying to
themselves
insult.
go.
I'm not trying to insult anybody, but like Indians in general are fairly slim people, right? But I've seen enough, from friends and stuff, like what their moms look like, and it's like, whoa, 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 something happened, and it's just all that naan, and it's pretty good food, but
It's mostly butters and creams in their food.
yeah, yeah,
Oh, it's a
yeah.
vegetarian diet. Yeah, but it's nothing but butter.
That vegetarian shit, it's so stupid. It's like you get no protein, therefore you have no muscles, and muscles are what burn the most calories. So yeah, you want to get slim, don't be a vegetarian.
So
The,
there's
the reason Indians are
yeah,
slim is because they don't have any food in India.
right, exactly.
I'm not laughing. I shouldn't laugh. I should say,
Well, I
but
don't necessarily know
uh,
what
yeah.
Mexicans are eating to cause
Um,
such a weight
it's
gain.
kind of like Indian food. I mean, it's like a lot of beans, a lot of cheese, a lot of butter, a lot of bread and grain, rice. Like it's really not that
It's carb
different.
heavy.
It's a lot of carbs. Yeah, cheap stuff.
They like beer. They drink a lot of beer.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so it's just like, man, there's just so many like we're inundated with low class males from third world countries now, in a nutshell, and it's a race to the bottom. That's the other thing. Like, is a lot of buildings and businesses do everything they can to deunionize because of the overburden of a lot of these climate change policies that have been introduced to New York. Um, Now it's just a race to the bottom. How low are you willing to go to pay this guy? Now you just have a bunch of these, I guess you can just say like, I don't know, painters, carpenters, if that, like, I don't even think they can do any of that type of stuff. So it's like all nepotism on connections, hiring nephews and nieces to go clean an office building or, go clean a school at night and a charter school for that matter. You shouldn't even say school. It'd be public school, it'd be private school. Pay them $15, $16 an hour, and then the city uh, realize like, oh, because of all these policies we've implemented, what we're going to do now is we're going to let's say it's a commercial building and you're not paying the air quote livable wage in New York to the workers that work in that building, we're going to take away your tax break to whoever the landlord is. So then the way around that is you just hire, a third party to take care of the building versus someone that works directly for the landlord. So the landlord say, no, well, it's not me, it's him. He's not the one paying the livable wage. So the onus is on him, not me, the landlord. So that's been a policy that Adams rolled out recently, and all this really ties into this bullshit climate change benchmark stuff. I think me and you talked about it last time we did a show that they're just
Mhm.
putting these carbon emissions on everything. Yo, the new one they're going after, if you can believe it, is brick oven and coal fire pizza. Like
Yeah, I heard about that. I heard about that.
if you got a small pizzeria and you're burning wood, they want you to install this industrial grade emissions carbon cleaning scrubber to your fucking restaurant.
I really
Eh,
think these people don't know how to do math because if we're talking about in terms of like the total emissions on the planet, that is literally a drop in the ocean. It is so insignificant, and not everybody like how many pizzerias do you need per capita in a place like Manhattan? It's probably one per 1,000. I mean, I don't know. Like it's not that much. So you're not going to make that much of an impact, even if it was something, because there's just not that
well,
many.
again, it's the fire the because it's a niche, it's niche, and it's a little bit harder to cook a pizza on an open flame versus a pizza oven. Like the pizza oven
Uh-huh.
guy's not getting attacked. It's a guy that's actually bringing wood in and he's cooking the pizza on an open
Uh-huh.
flame using fire.
Yeah,
That guy's under attack. So obviously the
whatever.
price of that pizza is going to go up, or they're just going to go out of business, one or the
How's
other.
how's this sort of, because I think California was pushing for like this ridiculous minimum wage for like fast food restaurants, like something like 20, 25 an hour for basically flipping hamburgers. And they, the most of the restaurants were like, okay, we can't afford this. Like this is insane. And the prices for a hamburger are already really high. So they're automating and they're looking at options to get rid of their labor force. Is there anything like that in New York where they're pushing for? And we don't have to keep talking about New York. I'm just
No,
kind of curious.
I'm down. Like what, pushing for automation?
No. Is there a government push for a ridiculously artificially high
Yeah,
minimum
it's
wage?
21 an hour, I think is what they want. They're at 15 or 17.
Yeah.
And
They just don't
it's strange
understand that
because
that causes people to lose a job. I mean,
well, not just lose a job. This is the back end of the thing is that if a guy cleaning the school, a porter, a custodian, is making $17 an hour, and you want to pay someone to work more of an administrator or a managerial job and pay him $3 more, well, he's not really all that incentivized to go and do a job that requires more responsibilities. He might as well just be a guy
right,
that picks through garbage. At least he
right,
doesn't have to answer anybody. He can listen to music as long as everything's clean. No one's
right.
complaining. Versus the other person who's got to be on the phone nonstop. If he's a salary worker, you're fucked basically because now you're working so many
Well,
hours
yeah,
and you're
and
making
that's
the same
happened.
wage.
That's happened in a lot of places. Like a lot of the like you could take the auto workers for example, or this recent. I haven't looked too hard into it because it just seemed so insane. But the UPS workers are part of the Teamsters union, and I know you're not necessarily against unions, but they were asking for $170,000 per year, and that's more than white collar workers make. It's certainly more than I've ever made in an office
Well,
job. It's insane. So,
it's funny. I actually wanted to make a mention. So my grandfather's he's on his way out, and he's like, I don't know, he's 88 or 89, and he was predominant person in the Teamsters back when the Teamsters were the Teamsters. You know what I mean? Back in the day. See, thing is, Adam, you don't know. Don't
does
get
he know
heavy
where
with me
Hoffa
now.
is?
Right. So no, uh, and he kind of explained to me a little bit more of the inner workings, like before, like the way the union is now. And you're like, okay, if you say that they want to make whatever, what'd you say, $170,000 or something
That's a
like
lot of
that?
money. That is a
Well,
lot
it
of money
probably includes
for picking
pension and
up cardboard
medical and
boxes. Are
401k and
you
all.
kidding me?
That's not going to be his
Yeah,
base.
that's fair. That's a fair point, but it's still. I can't imagine. The
When you go and
longshoremen
sit
went on
down
strike
with,
on the West Coast. They were looking for 200,000 for basically moving a crane boom back and forth. It's insane. I mean, you don't have to go to college for that. Yeah, I'm sure you have to study it for 2 days until you figure it out. But it's like I can't imagine how that's worth that. So anyway, I made my point clear.
what they would do,
I'll listen now.
like when you go like, okay, that's what you want. All right, so the union delegates or the representatives go and sit down with CEOs and what have you, like whoever runs the actual operation. Those guys are going to open their books and show the union guys, yeah, that's not happening. Like, what do you want, crack? Like that. Just because you demand it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it. Because as soon as you sit down at the table and you open up the books and show, like, as soon as the Ford or Chevy, GM opens up their books, like, yeah, not happening, dude. Like, and if we were to do that, the price of the cars are going to go up. No one's going to buy the cars, and you're going to be out of work. So why don't we come to some type of agreement?
Mhm.
What happens though is, like, for example, let's say, um, I don't want to keep bringing up New York, but the Long Island Railroad, it's like it is it's so bad. It's so bad, and these guys are making like $250,000 driving a train. Granted, it's a
It's
hard job.
nuts.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah, they make
a
stupid money.
lot of those systems are automated, and all these
Mhm.
idiots have to do is open the door. I mean, it varies depending on where you are, but it's a cushy job.
It's a phenomenal job. It's
I question if it's even a job. It's more of a welfare
it's the
stipend.
ultimate job to have in New York is to work for the Long Island Railroad. There's no need for a conductor, a guy that punches tickets anymore. That can be all automated. Even the train itself can be automated.
Yeah.
And there's great YouTube videos of the union delegates fighting with the managers over like the state of the Long Island Railroad. And there's always, and it's a big thing that you're just constantly trying to attack the Long Island Railroad. From my experience, it's terrible. But when the managers are complaining about the abuse of overtime, well, who approved the overtime? You approved the overtime. The union guys are saying, we told you we needed to hire a bunch of other workers to offset all this overtime. You didn't want to hire. So they're attacking the unions, and then the unions push back and say, you're the managers. We're okay with not working overtime, but who's going to do the work? There's no one here to work. The union book says that if you're working more than X amount of hours for this amount of time, in an allocated amount of time, a month, 2 months, a year, he's entitled to X, Y, Z. You approved the union book 3-4 years ago, and now you're bitching and moaning about it. So there's a tug of war. The bigger problem, though, is these are type of jobs you can't necessarily outsource. You know what I mean? Okay, you can do the automated route, but again, who's repairing the systems that need to be automated? Do you have the actual practical knowledge to
Yeah,
go
and
about
look,
fixing these
just
things?
so I can be clear on where I'm coming from, I'm not against people having a job, and I'm not against a fair wage. But when I know people who work construction or whatever, who are busting their ass, and who are injuring their bodies, get paid 35, 45 grand a year max. And I see these guys sitting on a friggin' padded seat pushing a button all day, and they're making 6 times that. It's egregious, and I
Well,
don't
I
understand how anybody can
dude,
not see that.
I had to take the Long Island Railroad recently, and I haven't been on it again the before times. And the train broke down. 12 o'clock at night. I'm like a stop away from where I have to go. And the engineer goes, everyone's got to get off. We can't get there's something wrong with the engine, something to that effect. I went fucking ballistic on the train, and I'm like, it's a fucking diesel fucking engine. What do you mean it's broken? Listen, I don't necessarily know what broke, but for a diesel engine to break, you have to be fucking retarded. Like a big ass diesel engine, it's not rocket science. God damn it! It's funny. I used to fix the fuel injection equipment to these trains for the Long Island Railroad when I was like 20 years old. I was like an apprentice.
Cool.
And so we would get the contract to fix what they couldn't fix.
Are they diesel electric or just straight diesel?
Straight diesel. Kawasaki, I don't know what the hell. They're made in Canada. It says made in Canada with a little Canadian flag on it.
Great.
Yeah, it's Kawasaki, because they make wave runners and shit. So, the name jumps out at me.
Well, it's Japanese, but they must have a North American
a plant in North America, right? So we would get the fuel injection equipment, and we would open up the casing to start working on the injectors. They were destroyed. We're talking these parts are worth thousands of dollars.
So why were they messed up? Were they not maintained, cleaned?
Because they didn't even fucking take care of the shit.
Okay.
So again, this guy's making $250,000. His job is to maintain the equipment, and he didn't even maintain it. And my boss at the time, he was
you're talking about the mechanic. I thought you were talking about the guy, like, quote unquote driving it.
They're all making 200,000, dude. They're all across the board. They're all making 152, 250, 300,000 easy. That's obviously including overtime, but you can get to 300,000 working for the Long Island Railroad plus overtime, 100%.
Amazing.
And they don't even take care of it. So, to your point about these guys are just kind of just pushing a button, really not necessarily doing the job. Yeah, you're 100% right, and that fuels the fire on why going that route, unionizing is such a bad idea, because you're overpaying these workers to just sit on their ass all day.
Yeah, I mean, I've just been thinking about this stuff a lot because I like airplanes and aerospace, and I've been really saddened by what's been going on with Boeing. and it's a phenomenon that seems to happen over and over again. And I'm not going to say just in America, but since I'm more familiar with America because I'm from here, the larger and older the company gets, the more this stuff seems to happen over time. And I really do think it comes down to culture, and you have to have, and you talk about, the union blaming the management, then the management blaming the union. Both sides are wrong in that.
Yeah.
You guys need to work together and really have kind of a shared mission. And when your shared mission is really just to try to extract as much as you can out of this dying animal known as whatever your company's called, that's going to end in disaster for anybody who uses the product, or works there long term, because it's just going to create a declining quality of everything. So it's sad. And the Boeing phenomenon, a lot of people blame it on the McDonnell Douglas merger, where the culture,
General
for example,
Dynamics too. Didn't Boeing buy out General Dynamics?
No, they're a separate company. They're
Okay,
separate.
okay.
Yeah, they're pure defense. Boeing is commercial and defense, but the McDonnell Douglas guys were defense, and that's kind of where that culture came from. The famous.
So what about Grumman?
Grumman's another company. Yeah.
But
So
Grumman's not Grumman anymore. They got bought out by someone.
Northrop Grumman is the,
Okay, there you go.
is the name of the
Okay.
company. But yeah, and there's like Raytheon, and there's a few more, but
Mhm.
those are the big boys. And the culture at Boeing used to be, they used to call it, like the sort of Boy Scouts of aerospace. Like everybody was like this kind of 1969 moon landing type, kind of guy, like clean cut, pocket protector, an engineering company. And when they merged with McDonnell Douglas, who was basically making fighter jets and missiles, and I'm not even sure about missiles, but I know they make the F-15, for example. They had this kind of like Washington culture where you're trying to like bribe people basically to sort of, hey, what do you think about this? Okay, all right, let's take you back, in the back room where we got, a lady of the evening for you. There was a lot of that, and they called them hunter-killer assassins. And so technically Boeing bought McDonnell Douglas, but effectively what happened was this like kind of aggressive, swashbuckling culture took over the Boy Scouts and ruined it. And they did a lot of really stupid stuff, in my opinion. They moved the headquarters, and some of that was for the unions, to battle the unions, frankly. They moved the headquarters of Boeing out of Seattle to Chicago, which has nothing to do with airplanes. So they just have this stupid building sitting in the middle of the city. And then recently they moved it over to Virginia, where they get a lot of their defense spending money. So they had been doing all this stuff and moving around operations. They spun off their assembler. Now it's called Spirit Aerosystems. It's a complete disaster. Like most of the 737 problems are coming from that operation. And they made it worse by giving it to these private equity guys who don't, first of all, don't know anything about making airplanes. Second of all, they don't give a shit. And so they're just trying to squeeze every dollar they can out of every missing bolt they don't put on. And so it's just gotten bad. And like the people there, they're kind of just mailing it in now. The employees have been like, well, another one just died. But there was this whistleblower that allegedly killed himself right before he was supposed to testify. I mean, it's super shady, super shady. So I don't know. What's my point? I think you just have to have a group of people that actually care about what they're doing. I mean, it sounds really simple and stupid, but it's true. And when you have people who are just like trying to get their next boat, that's not good. That's not a good company to be in.
Did you watch the Boeing documentary by any chance?
No, but we did a show on it actually like two and a half years ago, before this like got really bad. I mean, it was bad then because they had a big 737 crisis, and about 10-15 years ago the 787 was having problems. Now they're having both of those planes having more issues. So I haven't seen it, but I'm pretty familiar with this stuff. I follow it. I've known people who've worked there, and it's really depressing. So I think really what you need is somebody just to go in there and clean house. I think they need to, do the Elon Musk Twitter treatment and just fire a bunch of people, because a lot of the people that have been there just clearly are not doing their job. And if you promote those people, they're they're just going to perpetuate this nonsense. So main point, a culture that cares. That's what you need.
Well, I watched the documentary. I fell asleep halfway in, but one of the big takeaways was
I wonder if
how
they're showing that documentary on Boeing airplanes as you fly on the across on your flight. Anyway, go ahead.
what was interesting because one of the points of the documentary is the documentary is trying to make is that when they separated the managers and moved them to a headquarters nowhere near the plant, that's when things started going sideways. That there's
That's a big part of it.
Right, the managers aren't actually there to see what the hell's transpiring. They're not actually engaging with any of the workers, and
Right.
just because of telecommunications, the computer, email, stuff like that, they didn't necessarily have to go there to see what was actually being produced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I guess the 747. I don't know why they don't bring that thing back. I guess it's just too
there's
old.
there's no sales. Really the only utility for it today is for cargo, but they
Freight,
have
yeah.
and that the only reason that's still a thing is because the way they designed it. It's a funny, interesting story if anybody cares, but the 747 was like a huge bet that the company made, and they weren't sure though if it was actually going to be successful as a passenger jet. So what they did was they designed. That's why it has that hump on the front. They designed the nose to be able to lift up, and then the pilot is still like above that, and then the entire main body section underneath where the flight crew is, that could be cargo. And so the nose coming up is one of the unique features of that airplane that allows cargo to be like complex cargo, basically, to be loaded in. And that still had some sales for a while, but it just got to a point where
I know COVID killed their sales big time because I
yeah,
got
but that's
into
not
it
specific
briefly.
to the 747. That was the whole airplane manufacturing sector.
Yeah, you're
But
right.
you're
I think when COVID hit, they was like, "Fuck
yeah.
this, might as well retire this archaic animal."
That could have been it, but I think the majority of it is just the airframe is just old. They need to retire the 737. I think they announced the 797 finally, but the 747 was built at a time when engine reliability wasn't as good as it is today.
True.
So
That's why you don't see
they have this.
four engines on a plane
That's
anymore.
right,
Now you
and
only see
it's just
two.
fuel. It's just fuel inefficient. So these airlines are running on really thin margins, and so they
You would,
can't.
but here's more
But
about this. Like, I'm trying to, because now you got me all into this. I was trying to figure out, like, wouldn't you want redundancy having four engines versus two? I mean, that's just, yeah, I know. I was reading so
That's
many
the
articles on the
big.
pros and cons of it.
Yeah, that's the big debate, and so I think it's called ETOPS. I forget what it stands
Yes.
for, but it's basically this provision that you need there needs to be a statistical threshold that is high enough that you can trust that this airframe is going to make it across an ocean. And they, General Electric, Pratt and Whitney, Rolls-Royce, those are the major jet engine manufacturers for these commercial liners.
GE.
Yeah, GE, right? Yeah, exactly. Although they've split up the companies like now, so I don't even know if it's like GE still. It's like GE Aerospace or something, but
GE
whatever.
Health.
GE Health is its own thing. I don't know what GE is left with, but anyway.
So they go from health. They're part of the military industrial complex, and they make microwaves.
I don't even know if they do that anymore. I mean, I think they probably like sell their brand to like some Chinese company now.
So what are you, GE? Can you please tell us exactly what you are?
I don't know. They used to. I used to have like a Gap credit card, and every time I'd pay it, like it would say like GE provided by GE Financial. It was like the worst website you've ever seen.
Get this. So I listened to that the podcast you did on GE. I couldn't believe it. You guys briefly mentioned Imwalt, the CEO.
Immelt, yeah.
Immelt. And do you know, and you didn't mention the story about him flying the 747 and then he had another 747 behind him as a backup with nobody on it.
No, didn't know that.
Yes, he did.
Uh,
They were like, what
right.
the hell is this guy doing? He'd fly on a 747 by himself and then have another 747 behind them in case that 747 broke down.
That's disgusting. That's absolutely disgusting. I mean, it reminds me, and we can keep doing the airplane thing because I love
No, I
talking
love it.
about
Just
it.
keep rolling, man.
Well, no, let me just finish the point because
Yeah, go, please.
what happened was the 747 was like the biggest wide body jet, which basically means like there's like a couple aisles basically in down the center, and there's a certain number of seats, but it has a certain width, right? And that means there's a lot of passengers. That was the biggest wide body jet that was available, and until basically the A380, which was the Airbus equivalent, which is a pure double decker. It just didn't have the cargo concept, and they stopped making that too. But the 737, I think, was the first transcontinental jet. It might be the 757 or 767, but the 777 was probably Boeing's really truly great last airplane. 787 wasn't too bad, but when the 777 came out, they had these really ginormous engines, and it was only two.
Yes.
And it was very like controversial if they're going to be able to do this. And I think they convinced the airplane regulators that, well, look, we put it in the wind tunnel. We've been running it for 1 million hours straight. They're just good engines. Like, we don't need to have 4 engines. And, they probably, well, with climate change coming along, you can argue all these things, a million different ways, but they were able to convince the regulators that 2 was sufficient. Do you want 4? I don't know. Depends on what you want. I mean, a lot of military aircraft have more than 4. Like the B-52 has 8. I think it's just each pod is like 2 in a cluster.
Yep.
So it's interesting, like how all these decisions are made, and like the U.S. Air Force is actually one of the biggest burners of aviation fuel on the planet. So you could see how the decisions are made. Like, there's different criteria, right? Like, but when it comes down to commercial aviation, most of that shit is what's the cheapest price, what's the cheapest ticket, and these airlines, I should say, are under a lot of pressure because it's a competitive market and it's been deregulated, and some would say that's bad. I don't know. I've actually chosen not to fly because of all these problems, and in United Airlines in particular, it scares the hell out of me because they've just been literally dropping wheels onto cars parked beneath the airplane, and like the landing gear would break, and just all this shit is really, again, it's attributable to these corporate cultures that I really think it's at the root. I mean, people have to go into work and want to do a good job, and if they don't. And you could say like, oh, it's the manager's fault or it's the worker's fault. I mean, it's everybody's fault. It's sort of like, the Jocko Willink philosophy is like, look, you have to accept responsibility at some point. Somebody's got to do that. You can't just point fingers at everybody else. And I think that's just too common, frankly, in America. I think there's a lot of there's an impulse to point fingers, and it's understandable given how screwed up our demography is, that there truly are very different groups that we now have to like call our brother and sisters, and it's just a very strange fit. But I don't think it's just diversity that's causing this. I think you could attribute it to short-termism, from Wall Street, greed, whatever, just a lack of
Called private equity.
Private equity, yeah. I mean, it's like, Boeing's not owned by private equity, but it's one of those things that came out of Wall Street that used to be called leverage buyouts, and then they changed the name to private equity because leverage buyouts firms like KKR got such a bad rap because all they would do is that they would borrow money, they would then bribe effectively the managers of these old industrial companies to sell to them, and they get these like cushy options packages or pay packages or whatever to make the deal. And then these guys with all this debt they just borrowed, they would then foist it onto the company itself, and then to pay off the debt, they would close like old plants and slash costs and do the stuff they did at Spirit Aerosystems, where they're cutting quality control and all this stuff to pay off the debt. And then once they're done and the damage isn't too obvious yet, then they'd flip it. And they called them corporate raiders and all these things. And so then they changed the name. It's debatable if these guys should be allowed to do this stuff, but it's, the managers are being greedy too, who are selling. The workers are, I don't know. I don't want to blame them. It's too hard to make a generalization like that. But sometimes these companies are not doing well because the company as a whole wasn't really keeping up. So again, it's like, look, if you're being targeted, that means you're weak usually. So it's tempting to point to one source, but I think it's more complicated.
So I've been on a 777 and I've been on an A380. A380 was much more pleasurable of an experience versus the 777.
It's a newer plane, in fairness, but the 787 has, and I know people who fly a lot, and they say it's a very nice aircraft. But yeah,
does that go international?
Yeah. It goes to Japan and places like that. Yeah.
I
All
will
Nippon
say,
Airways was
looking at
actually
the 777,
first.
like optically, like looking at it, way sexier than the A380.
Okay.
It was and those engines were a trip. I was on the tarmac, and that thing.
Yeah.
Oh my God, was that engine? I'd never seen anything like it. It was just a monster.
Boeing likes to brag that the width of the 787, or excuse me, the 777, the 777's engine, the width of that is as big as the 737's fuselage. So you could fit that tube that goes in the middle of the wings in one of those engines for the 777. And I think they made them bigger. They just keep making them bigger because it's sort of like with windmills, like the sort of energy, the physics of windmill power generation is kind of weird. Like there's like a cube in it, like you have to like raise it to the power of 3. So the bigger the blades, the more power you get out of them. So I don't know if that's exactly what they're doing, but I mean, I would imagine there's obviously a fuel efficiency reason for.
So what you tell me? Circling back, you told me they don't make the A380 anymore.
They don't. No, they. Really? I mean, they made.
So that's a short lifespan for manufacturing
I'm pretty sure,
a plane.
I could double check that, but they might still have backlog that they're working through. But I'm pretty sure Airbus stopped doing that. It was really kind of like a dick measuring contest at the time. Airbus, or it used to be called EADS, it's like European Aerospace and Defense Systems. They were a conglomerate that was like a multinational joint venture between the French, the Germans, the British, and they had like the Italians sort of doing a few things. But it was a European operation, and they wanted to compete with America. And so they always saw the 747 as like this big, scary thing that Americans were dominating everything with. And so they wanted to build this thing. And I remember when they rolled it out, it was like Tony Blair was there and like, yeah, look at this, And it was just a dick measuring contest. It's got 4 engines on it. It's got, instead of like the hump to make the 2 decks, it's got the whole thing is 2 decks.
It's one big hump. Right, yeah,
look at us. Yeah. We're even bigger. And
so basically, it was like where the Europeans were with
it's
battleships in the turn of the 20th century.
Yeah, produced from 2003 to 2021. Yeah, so it's done.
Wow. Okay.
And Emirates and Singapore Airlines, I think, were the big users of it because it's really complicated when these airlines make these buying decisions because they have to look at their route network, and you really have to have like people who've studied like operations research to understand how this stuff works. Singapore's Airlines CEO used to actually be one of these guys. He was a really smart dude. But if you have a hub, this is the type of airplane you want. If you have a hub and spoke network, it works for you because you can basically shuttle everybody into these like giant like planes by using your hub. But if you have a more diffuse network, and they call it like a point-to-point network, I think, you want a smaller airplane. And so a lot of the airlines were looking at the hub and spoke model, which is like the old school way of doing it, and comparing it to the newer model. And that's really what Boeing's decision was, actually, while Airbus was rolling out this Gigantor thing. They realized that the hub and spoke model was just not very efficient for most airlines, and so they decided to just go smaller. And that was a good decision, finally, from these guys. But they've been making a lot of poor decisions on just the manufacturing level. But strategically, that was probably the right bet. But the Emirates guys, because it was coming out of, I think, was it Dubai, I guess. They have a huge hub, and so they were one of the big purchasers, and then Singapore was like similar. But yeah, they canceled
that's
it.
who I flew with on the A380s with Singapore Airlines. Best
Yeah.
airline ever been on, man.
Yeah,
It was
excellent.
top
Very good.
tier.
It's always had high ratings. Yeah, unlike America's piece of shit unionized airplanes. I mean, they're terrible. I mean, I've flown to Asia a few times, and like they always have like attractive young women. Okay, and the only
Yes.
example of that I can think of in the West is like maybe Virgin Airlines or something. But there's like, there must be a clause in the flight attendants union in America that says you cannot be above a 7 in attractiveness in order to maintain your
Yeah,
job.
the flight attendants on the Singapore flight, gorgeous. I mean, they all look like
Right.
supermodels. Crazy.
Right.
And then for the 777, it was the same route. I was on both those planes for like 20 hours when I was in Asia. More cramped. It just wasn't as, and that was with China Air, which is out of Taiwan. Yeah, I've been on quite a. What's interesting is how Airbus, how any European or foreign market for these type of things like cars has just crushed the United States. I mean, GM and Ford are just, hollow shells of what they used to be. And one reason, and maybe you can toast this if you want, just like Americans were not good at making smaller engines compared to the Japanese. Or you know what I mean? Like, like a 4-cylinder Ford, there's something about that. It's like kind of cringe. You
Right.
know what? It's like, I don't know about that. The Chevy Volt was just taken out of production. So like, I guess this is the same kind of like similarity between Airbus now just overtaking Boeing, and man, it's sad. And
It's sad. It's sad.
one other point. So the B-52 will be the first airplane to have a lifespan or production, whatever you want to call it, lasting for 100 years.
Wow, I didn't know they were still making them, but yeah, I think the Air Force wants to keep them.
Well, I saw like some military PDFs or whatever on the cost benefit of a B-52 versus a B-1 bomber. And it's not even close how much cheaper a B-52 is, and the payload just, they're actually almost similar. I don't want to say that the B-52 blows the B-1 out of the water, but the B-52 is more versatile as far as what it's able to carry.
You talking
It could go from
about the
nukes to
B2?
smaller things, and the B-1 is like a one-trick pony.
Are you talking about the B2, the stealth one, or are you talking about the B1?
No, the B2 and the B1.
Okay.
The B2 I know is like, ridiculously expensive, but the only thing that rivals the B-52 is the B1, and the B1 is more expensive to maintain than the B-52.
Oh yeah, I mean, you have to look at also what the use case is. It's a more high performance aircraft. It's basically designed to float under Soviet radar back in when that was still a thing, and they were using low altitude, high speed attack vectors as opposed to.
What's your favorite military aircraft? How about I'm gonna punt that one to you. Favorite military aircraft of all time?
Well, I got to say, in general, the Americans have always done a better job for once than every other country. I really,
come on now, dude.
Really do think the U.S. aerospace industry is still pretty damn good. Our jets are getting way uglier for sure, but I don't know. Like I'm gonna say the F4 just because it actually had some action for once.
Nice. That's a good choice.
Cool. Yeah.
How about when they didn't mount the machine guns in the early part of the Vietnam War?
Well, that was a mistake apparently, but I like their guts on that one.
Mine's definitely the Aardvark F-111.
All right, yeah.
That is the fastest bomber ever produced.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay. Fighter
uh,
bomber at least,
fighter
but
bomber. Yes, fastest
because the
fighter bomber ever
B1,
produced.
but B1 can go pretty quick. I think it
Y-
could go like Mach like 0.95. I don't know if
Thanks
it
for
can
the
go
correction. Yeah, fastest. What do you call? What was it? Attack bomber? What the hell it was?
fighter bomber. I'm
Fighter
not sure
bomber.
if it's even. You might even be right. It might be a attack bomber, but it's kind of a sluggish looking aircraft. So I don't know if I'd
Yeah,
want to
well,
be in a
that was
dogfight.
one of the reasons why it never really amounted to anything. They're like, well,
Okay.
this is too big to be put on an aircraft carrier. If you look back at like the 80s, I was like enamored by super carriers like the Nimitz classes and
Okay.
Enterprise, even like the Forrestal class, the Kitty Hawk class. I know them all. Um, how much more versatile in choices in aircraft we had just on a
Right.
on a carrier in the 80s.
Yes.
You had
Oh
like
yeah.
the A380, not A380, A3A. What the hell was it? The E2B.
Yeah.
These,
There's like
you know what I'm talking
A3
about?
intruders and all these
Yes,
weird things,
intruder, right?
and the AWACS thing that would sit on the carrier deck would be kind of cool sometimes.
Right. Then you had the
Yeah.
F-18, and then you had the F-14, and you had all like
Right.
4 or 5 different
Top Gun. Yeah.
aircraft
For,
at your disposal, and now you're what left with just an F-18. It's like what the
Well,
hell?
no, it's F-35. I mean, I think that the goal was to streamline and simplify, and they had hell of a tough time doing it. But I think in the long run, if they do it right, it might have been a good idea. But it's yeah, I think it's F-35 just about. They probably still have Hornets, the F-18s. F-14 has been scrapped. I
You
think I
think they're
saw
gonna
some.
retire the F-15 now? I think F-16. I don't think we use it,
Yeah,
do we?
I don't know about the F-15. That one is a pretty successful program, but you might be right. I haven't kept up on reading about it.
An F-16 still in existence or no?
No, it's still around. But I saw or I heard, I can't remember, but it was a pretty jarring statistic about the radar signature of the F-16 versus the F-22, which has also been shit
Hmm.
canned, but um, it was something like a million times worse in terms of its visibility on radar. The F-16, the Falcon, this
Yeah, I
sort
can
of
imagine.
super agile, high performance jet. But and you know, you could sort of chime in on this because I know you know what I'm talking about. But back in when they were putting the F4 out there in Vietnam, they thought like missiles were really the ultimate way to kill your opponent, and you know, guns were kind of stupid. But the logic now is that that might finally be coming true with the advances in networked warfare. Basically, you have the ability to figure out what actually is going on really far away from you, and you might just want to have missiles and drones doing most of this. Um, so yeah, I mean something like an F-16, which is really geared towards high maneuverability, and which is kind of what the Russians have focused on, because frankly, I don't think they have some of the technical abilities on the missile side, and maybe you could say hypersonics, but they've focused on dogfighting in Russia for their jets, and their stealth, I should say, specifically,
Hmm.
is just not up to the American capability. And they even haven't even made, even if you believed the propaganda about the PAC-4, Sukhoi 57, whatever it's called, that thing, they've only made like 12 of them, and then 8 of them are like demo jets, like, and 4 of them are for real. So they just haven't made them. So that tells me that they don't have a lot of confidence in them. But the F-16, my main point was that it was designed for high maneuverability, and it was designed by a guy named Pierre Spray, and he was one of the big critics of the F-35, and he also helped do the A-10, which is this goofy looking thing. But
Warthog.
Warthog, yeah, but it's pretty cool jet, and it actually saw a lot of action during the Afghanistan
Gulf.
conflict.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know about the Gulf. You might be right, but I do know
Well,
that
the
they used
Warthog you're
it.
talking about, right? The tank killer.
Yeah, they used it against the Taliban a lot. They would shoot up these
Yeah,
like
because that
mountain.
monster Gatling gun at the front.
Yeah, they call it the Burt, the Burt.
We-
If you watch a YouTube video of it, it's pretty insane. And during the in like the proving grounds in Nevada, wherever they test these things, they put these like rusted out old cars that they practice on, and then like they'll set the camera up like 200 feet away from it, and then as the thing approaches, like you can sort of hear the jets, and then all of a sudden there's just like this like incineration. It's just like a
Right,
knife
there's a
like
cloud
cutting
of
through the
dust and
thing.
fire.
Yeah.
You know,
Anyway,
before,
we're getting all over the
sorry.
place, but the F-16, super maneuverable, but easy to see. And if you can shoot a missile at it, I mean, it's sort of pointless, right?
Before we get off the top of commercial airlines, I was fortunate enough to live and grow up close to JFK Airport, and playing in my yard uh, as a kid, I used to always see and hear the Concorde, and I took it for granted. I was like 5 or 6 years
Nice.
old, but
Yeah.
it was so low to my house, man, and it was such a beautiful fucking sound, and I would always look up at it and just in such awe and amazement.
That's cool.
This
That's
thing, Adam, I swear,
cool.
when you heard this thing, it was majestic, dude. It was
Yeah.
so fucking cool. You try to listen to YouTube videos, but it gives it no justice when you actually see it in person flying over your head. You're like, I'm
Right.
like 4 or 5 years old, and you just hear this screech, just howl. Like, what the hell was that? Just blowing your eardrums out. I was like, that is the coolest fucking thing ever.
I wonder if you were actually hearing the full throttle, because they had to basically limit that aircraft to transatlantic flights because it was so loud that people didn't want it going over their house.
It's funny. So what they would do is they would change the patterns. So it'd be like every 3 or 4 months it would disappear, and then it would roll back around over a certain
People
time
forget.
because they had to change the pattern, because this neighborhood was complaining, that
Right.
neighborhood was complaining. So
funny.
obviously, being New York and then obviously London, Paris, it would fly right over my head growing up. And I did a show with Expat Aftermath, my good friend. You chatted with him briefly, but
Yeah.
we were talking a little bit about the Concorde, and like, oh well, and this kind of is in your wheelhouse. We were kind of toying with the idea. Did they really discontinue it because perhaps like we just don't have the knowledge to really maintain such a sophisticated aircraft, like the pilots, the mechanics, so on and so forth. Like,
No. I think it's an economic decision. I mean, the technology is in the military aircraft, everywhere. So I don't think there's a technical inability. I
either
think
there's
it's mainly just
incompetency, just idiocracy. I mean,
well,
the New York City subway system is a prime example. The people that built this New York City subway system. This is a good story. So, my step grandfather's best friend was one of the people that knew how to fix the signals in the New York City subway system. Vietnam vet. He actually just passed away, and he came over for like bagels and coffee one morning. He goes, "Oh, I got to go to work." I'm like, "You're retired. What do you mean you're going to go to work?" He goes, "No, the MTA actually wants me to be a consultant because the people that are supposed to fix the decrepit old signal system don't know how to fix it, don't know how to repair it. So here's this 75-year-old guy going back to New York City to try to train younger people on how to operate the signal system." I mean, take it for what it's worth, but he was kind of more or less describing what I'm trying to describe when it came to the Concorde.
I understand the concept you're describing, and there's many examples of that. They have the same problem in Germany, actually, because chemical companies, they have these old timers that know how BASF's chemical plant works, and the youngsters aren't studying chemical engineering as much, and so they're having difficulty to bring these guys back. I knew some guys that had to get called back to the airlines during the Y2K thing, that they knew how to do COBOL programming, which is this old business
MDOS.
It was even before that. It was mainframe junk, but the it's a thing. But again, to the question of like, is the Concorde dead because the technical ability is not there? I think no. I think it was mainly they had a crash, and then people are like, okay, I don't trust this. And then is it really worth trying to do a huge marketing campaign to like keep this thing alive when it's frankly losing money already? And I think that was the main nail in the coffin. Could be wrong, but yeah. And I'm not disagreeing. Both can be
No,
true,
I
by the
know.
way.
It's just
Technical
it's food for thought.
competency can still be declining on average, and then there's still pockets of competency in certain areas, right? But on average, yeah, it's going down. It's scary.
All right, so here's another one for you. I debated a flat earther with IM 5 or 6 years ago.
Wait, what side were you on for that? Just I need to make
Uh,
sure
I'm
we're
I'm
going to
I'm a
continue
I'm
this
a globetard.
conversation.
I'm a
Okay,
globetard.
me too.
Okay,
Good. Just wanted to make sure.
and we got into the conversation about the moon landing. And
Yeah.
prior to
Okay.
me prepping for that show, I got to sit down with a satellite engineer who works for. He basically works like across the street from the Pentagon. Put it to you that way,
Okay.
without doxing anyone.
Sure.
So
Sure.
I sat down with him and I told him, "Hey, listen." He knew about the show and stuff. And I told him, "Listen, I'm going to be debating a guy who doesn't believe we went to the moon landing."
Okay.
And one of the talking points is we don't have the technology to build the Saturn V rocket. And I was like, "Can you please
What?
elaborate on that?"
Doesn't
And
even make
it was
sense.
interesting. Actually what he said, he goes, actually, that we don't. I'm like, "What the hell are you talking about?" He goes, and basically what he was explaining to me is in order to build the Saturn V rocket again, you have to go back to the designer's drafts and notes, which they no longer have anymore. So
Okay.
when you design a
Fine.
piece of the Saturn V rocket, you can't just take that part and say, "Oh, let's just replicate it." You need to understand, why did they make that part in a certain way. That's the
Right.
technology that they do not have anymore.
Okay, but that has nothing to do with did we go to the moon, because the people that designed that were still alive and still like on Cape Canaveral when that thing was being launched. I mean, that's talking about now. So that's a little bit outside, I think, of what the argument I think should be focused on. But go ahead, please.
No, that was basically, he says you have to go back to the notes, the drafts, the scrap paper
Sure.
to understand what were they were trying to convey and what were they trying to do. To your point about um, if those guys are alive, yeah, of course they're, I'm sure half of them are still alive, but they're not going to recall what the hell they scribbled in their notebook in 1965.
Well,
You know what I mean?
yeah, I don't know. This is all true, but it's like, what is the main point here? I mean, we have SpaceX, okay, who's kicking NASA's ass right now, and basically and I shouldn't say NASA, because NASA is basically just the government like agency,
It's
and then they
subsidizing
hire.
childish white women. Yes, but go on.
Yeah, exactly. But no, but they used to hire this stupid joint venture that did nothing called United Launch Systems, that was a joint venture between Boeing and Lockheed to build their rockets. Okay, so they were just screwing around for 10 years. But SpaceX got all the smart people. Okay, so again, it's like, okay, where are the smart people? Like, you talk about the automakers, like we can't build a small engine. There's nothing stopping Americans from doing that. It's just like all the smart people are working in Wall Street and Silicon Valley, so they're not in
Yeah.
Detroit anymore, which is sad. But that's why it's
Yeah,
not
they're
like
learning how to
Americans.
rob grandma's pension fund instead of building shit.
Yeah. But it's not like genetically Americans can't do these things. It's just like, okay, where's the most exciting fortune or opportunity or whatever project that people want to do? The minds are going to go to that. So right now, Elon Musk is a pretty interesting guy, and so he's got a lot of the smart people working for him. And so if you look at Starship, I mean, that thing is way better than the Saturn V. I mean, who cares about the Saturn V? So it's like,
What? How blasphemy, bro. Come on.
Saturn V is big, it's got brawn, and it shoots in a straight line. But I mean, look at what SpaceX is doing now. It's a strange looking rocket, I'll give you that. But it looks like that because it's reusable, which enables a lot. It basically enables a lot more launches, economically speaking, to be had without actually needing a huge government allocation. I mean, I think the moon program took up like
2%
1%.
of the GDP. It was something,
Yeah, which is insane.
stupid. Yeah, it was something
SpaceX doesn't take that
ridiculous.
much. So that matters, It's like the Soviet Union collapsed because they spent half their money on tanks and stupid shit that like didn't.
Look how far that's got them.
I don't know. I mean, if you want to talk about Russia, like people
Yeah,
are like,
yeah.
oh,
Let's get into it because you were just
Russia,
shitting on
Russia.
Russia during your last.
Look, I have no real dog in this fight, frankly. I just try to understand what's going on. And again, like if you want to make your economy geared towards war and what is the population of Ukraine versus Russia? I mean, it's like 10 times the bigger, than Ukraine, right? So of course, like you guys can crush them if you try, but war economies work in the short run. But if just look no further than North Korea. North Korea has never stopped being a war economy. And
Yeah.
where's Russia getting all of its artillery and shells from? Uh, they're making them, but they're also buying a lot from North Korea because
Yeah.
North Korea is not very technically capable, certainly not as technically capable as South Korea, where all these semiconductor fabs are, and Samsung and Hyundai and making all these complex things. North Korea can't do that. What can they do? They can make steel tubes with explosives that go in them. That's pretty simple. It's a communist's dream to like have a artillery operation because it's not complicated. You just need numbers. So yeah, great. Do that for 70 years and see how far you get. You're gonna get as far as North Korea. So if you look in the short run and you look at these things like it's a tabletop strategy game, fine. But more sophisticated strategy games like Civilization and whatever, they have a technology tree. So if you can't grow on that technology tree over time, you're going to fall behind. That's what the Soviets did. And if you're fighting a tiny country, comparatively speaking, you should be able to win. But the fact that they haven't won yet, I think is pretty lame. I mean, they've been advancing for 2 years is the joke, right? They're stuck in the mud. I mean, are we supposed to
I keep hearing any
congratulate
day
them?
now
Like,
Russia's gonna beat them. I'm waiting.
no, they might. It doesn't mean they won't, but it's like, are we supposed to be impressed by this?
I'm not. I'm disappointed, to be honest with you. I'm very disappointed. I really thought Russia was, at least be at Kiev by now. I don't know. It's like you're
Well, they
still.
were, and then they left.
Then they left.
They forgot their rations or something. It was like this joke going around that like they thought they were gonna win so quickly that they didn't bring any food and water.
Or the fact that they realize Kiev is not as strategically as important. Taking a capital city is not important as it was 200 years ago.
I don't know. I mean, it would be very symbolic, obviously, but they, yeah, and it's. I'm not a military like historian, but I do remember that Hitler got really obsessed with Stalingrad, and yeah, and Moscow too. But he stopped. He didn't want to take it for whatever the hell reason, and maybe he was thinking.
No, he realized Moscow was away. First, the Guinness Book of World Record longest siege for a capital city was Germany's encirclement of Moscow, and you can't be. Look, I mean, you stretch yourself so fucking thin. Pick one. It's either Stalingrad or Moscow, and they were just hell bent on the both of them at the same time, and that was just stupid.
Are you thinking of Leningrad, St. Petersburg? Because I know that they besieged that. Okay.
With the siege of Moscow, I became kind of obsessed with that. I'm like, why the hell? I was wondering why you got to take Moscow. Why weren't you? Because everyone talks about Stalingrad. No one talks about them trying to take Moscow, which was a big deal to Hitler's ambitions or whatever it might be. Which is interesting because the logistic generals of the Wehrmacht basically told like the military wing, this is stupid. Like we cannot do this, man. Like we don't have the bandwidth to stretch across the entire Russian border. Like pick one location and go after it. Right. Stalingrad made the most sense because then you reach the oil fields, and and this kind of circles back to the situation right now is that Russian strategy, Soviet strategy, whatever you want to call it, has been and always been this deceit is a way of thinking, that they're losing, that, that we're over here when in fact we're going over there. Go to Kiev, pull out of Kiev, go in this direction. That tends to be a Soviet doctrine, which is carried on to this point because I think your guest on your show was making that point that all these guys have a Soviet military mindset, and I'm not necessarily saying that's a wrong mindset. Because these guys did, fight the Cold War with an economy equivalent of what Italy's for a span of whatever, how many years was it? The Cold War is what, 40
I mean,
years or some shit?
frankly, I think the Soviet Union was probably had a bigger economy than Russia
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
until probably like the late 90s or something, because it
What,
just got so bad. It was so because they were so far behind. Like none of their stuff was competitive, like zero. Maybe the natural resources, because okay, if you literally have the only ore deposit in the world, you're going to be able to sell it, right? But if you have a factory that churns out these like two-stroke pieces of shit Ladas, nobody wants them. So that's what the Soviet Union was. It was just this like workers' paradise. Everybody is guaranteed employment. Imagine a giant union runs your entire
Yeah,
country. That's what the Soviet Union was.
Well,
Literally, the word union's in it. So there you go.
going back to when I worked at that being an apprentice at the diesel shop, my boss went over to the Soviet Union and for some training. It was like the late 80s. I forgot the whole story behind it, but he was explaining to me that these guys were actually fantastic workers, and the reason why a lot of them were alcoholics is because they got all their work done within the first 2 hours and sat around and drank all day because there was no incentive to keep working. So they did as much work as possible, got it all done, whether a good job or bad job it's besides the point, is that they just hurried up, got everything done so they could just play cards and fucking get drunk all day.
All right. I mean, I'm sure some of that story is very true. I mean, obviously some of it has to be, but definitely.
Just like I haven't seen any Russian subs. I haven't seen much of their. Where's their Air Force? That's the other thing. I haven't seen any bombings or fighter jets. All I see is drones. Just taking out some peasant in the field.
They're getting shot down. I mean, I think they have some air dominance, not superiority, but like, well, yeah, I guess they do have technically superiority, but it's not in the American sense where it's just like, okay, like wave and wave and wave, and then we're unmolested, uncontested in the skies. Like I don't think that's their fighting posture. I think they've been doing like very like careful sorties, but I think they're worried about losing their nice jets, and so they don't use them. They use those weird like alligator helicopters, and they're kind of cool. Like they're double rotored, so they don't need the tail rotors. But it's those are just kind of like skirmishers. They're not bombing, but they don't need to because it's like right on their border. So they're doing what they did in was it Grozny? They just leveled the shit out of everything with artillery. It's a very simple strategy. Just like, okay, well, we obviously are not going to be using whatever we're blowing up ever, so let's just kill everything, and it's just carpet bombing using artillery. So I don't know. I mean, like, yeah, okay, you're a giant thug, like, great, but I just these like fanboys on the internet like that think like Putin's a genius and like, wow, their economy's booming. It's like, look, they have a wartime economy. They've dumped like half their budget again into this shit. Like, okay, let's see how that works for the next 20 years. It's stupid. It's very short term. I'm sorry. So,
I'm looking at the Ukraine side. I'm wondering where they're finding fighters at this point. Are they literally just dragging people?
Oh,
like out of
Ukraine's
schools?
in a bad shape. I'm not saying Ukraine's gonna win. I'm just saying, the people that think like the Russians are so good. It's
Based
like
Russia.
they could have won by now if they were like this, because they're up against a tiny country. I mean, like the demographic, the average age of like Ukrainian men is like 40 or older. It's horrible, and the women are leaving. They're partying in Poland or something. It's whatever the meme is. It's bad. It's bad. I'm not optimistic about Ukraine's prospects here.
What's your take on the whole use of drones? What's
That's
your opinion on
interesting.
it?
I'm not a drone expert at all by any means. I think it makes sense though. I mean, why would you send out, your limited supply of young men to die in this really complex, expensive airplane that needs refueling and landing and air bases when you could just have a stupid drone go do the same thing. I don't get why you would need a fighter jet for this type of conflict. It's a local conflict. Fighters like make sense if you're going up against like squadrons of bombers and you want to shoot them out of the sky over the Pacific Ocean or something.
Right.
But like if you're on a land-based battlefront, it's kind of silly, you know. Just use artillery, do everything from the land. But your opposition's doing the same thing, and so it's like that's why they're kind of at a standstill. It's like, how do you actually get this thing done? And I think really what the Russians are going to do is they're just going to wait it out. They're just going to keep it up until eventually the West gets bored of this shit, and then they'll storm in there, because the resolve of people in Washington is clearly not as high as the people in Moscow or as the people in Ukraine. And so who's going to fund this thing? The Ukrainians certainly can't do it. So I think, yeah, they're just going to wait it out. I think it's a simple strategy. Now, who knows? I mean, maybe the Ukrainians get lucky and Putin slips in the bathtub or something. But like I don't know. Short of that, they're not looking good.
Well, is it the death of the tank?
I don't know. I probably not, but I mean, you could still make like drone tanks and stuff. I think the concept of like a land-based moving artillery piece is basically what a tank is. It's not bad, right? But I think maybe what you're getting at, you tell me, but like the fact that they're vulnerable from drones does make it sort of questionable. It's like, should we be investing all this money, like, you know, like the land battleship, basically? It's like, should we be blowing all this resource on building these things that are really easily destroyed? And I don't know if they're that easily destroyed. It's just that the previous designs of tanks were not obviously designed for drones coming at them, because drones didn't exist. So they have these like goofy looking cope cage things that like they've
Yeah.
been welding onto the top of the turret. But you know, the next iteration of tanks will have drones in mind, and they'll probably be able to do much better. The real question is like, what is the most effective use of your resources in a war? And is having a few tanks useful? I don't know. It's a good question, but I think
I've
they
seen
will evolve.
as far as this conflict goes. So I'm interested in how the tank's role in this war has played out versus in Syria, where I watched probably hundreds of hours of tank footage from Syria.
So you tell
And
me, because I don't understand really the Syrian battlescape, but it was in my mind, ignorantly, admittedly, like I just thought it was like an urban area, kind of like what happened in like Baghdad or something. Maybe not though. But if it's urban, how do you use a tank? Because I thought that was actually one of the big problems with the U.S.
you just level
military.
the whole city with tanks. That's exactly what happened in
Do the
Syria.
Russian strategy. Okay.
That's what in Syria they just went in there with T-72s, and
Okay.
they had the cope cages in the war in Syria. Interesting, the kind of little side factoid, useless knowledge. In Syria, they would have the cope cages, but they would stuff like concrete and rocks and rubble in the cope cages. So every time, I guess, when the
Wow.
retractive armor was damaged, like they didn't necessarily have as much retractive armors as, like, you know, other countries did. So they would just put cinder blocks and stuff inside the cope cages around the turret. I thought that was like,
Wow.
this is
Did it
like
work?
wild. I
Did
have
it work?
interestingly, I don't know if it necessarily worked, but what Russia did during the war in Syria is they would send their tank engineers to Syria to examine battle damage on
Okay.
the T-72. So
Sure.
with the war in Syria, I guess the Russians learned a lot through that conflict, but I don't necessarily see parallels in combat to the war in Syria, where it was much more urban. You're fighting sloppy jihadists. You're not fighting guys that are, you know, using high performance gear from the United States. You know, so they're not similar. The combat is totally different. The landscape is totally different, and the objectives are totally different. So I can't. I don't know enough about Ukraine to weigh in on what is actually happening during the war in Syria. And I wrote that article. It was my last article on the American Sun. I was able to really learn a lot about what was happening in Syria because of Iqbal, not Iqbal, that's a more of a Pakistani name, but
Yeah.
who some guy with his potato iPhone going around recording videos of his city streets and what's going on outside his window. You don't have that with the war in Ukraine. I tried doing the same strategy as I did 10 years ago, or more now. It's more like 13 years ago, on how to get that footage off of YouTube, and I tried implementing it for the war in Ukraine, and it doesn't work. So I can't find any really good footage
So
about the
you think
war.
it's being censored by
Oh yeah,
YouTube and the West
totally.
that doesn't want? Okay, that makes sense.
Totally. Because in the war in Syria, the YouTube was a more of a propaganda arm for the sloppy jihadists. I'm not even gonna call them ISIS or Al Qaeda. I think that's stupid to call them that. They use that like some faction, some sloppy jihadist faction.
Yeah.
I remember the Osama
Yeah.
bin Laden's was a group, if you can believe it. They would have a
Okay.
YouTube channel and they would upload combat footage. On the Syrian side of things, because they're an actual professional army, you didn't necessarily get as much footage. Most of that footage from the Syrian side of the conflict was uploaded by civilians that were actually there to witness what was going on. As far as Ukraine goes, what I'm getting is just sheer propaganda videos. Like, okay, you dropped a drone on a tank with no one in it, you blew the tank up. Like, whoopee fucking do. That thing was sitting in the field probably for weeks, and you just made a video that you blew up a tank, and you're showing that what you did was successful. When in fact, the crew of that tank abandoned it for God knows what reason. Probably didn't know how to drive it, or got stuck in the mud and just fled.
There's got to be like a social media network though that is somewhat accessible that like the people in Ukraine use. I don't even know where to start for the Russians.
It's Telegram.
Pretty censored. But isn't that a Russian company? Like, how does that work? Like, so Ukrainians are using a Russian
Telegram.
social network?
Yeah.
That's strange to me.
I
How
was
is
following
that?
a couple channels on Telegram, but it was kind of like following their shit's really like annoying. I was like, I'm tuning out to this because it was
Okay.
like death metal music and
Oh yeah. All right.
it was just obnoxious to follow. We were like the I guess the one in the shit from Syria. They had like nasheed music blasting, and it was a little bit more thrilling to watch versus this stuff.
Well, we'll see. It's interesting with the U.S. election coming up. It's going to be really interesting, and I honestly I just hope this gets settled. I'm kind of sick of it. It's basically white people murdering white people for absolutely nothing. There's no benefit to any of this.
It's a genocide of Ukrainians. The Ukrainian people are just going to be non-existent at the rate this shit's going. Everyone's going to Poland.
It's horrible.
It is. It's horrible. I don't see. It's just white dudes killing white dudes. It's like, man, there's bigger fish to fry than this
for
stupid
nothing.
Conflict.
For absolutely nothing. They're basically destroying the land that they're fighting for, and destroying their people. And then whoever wins gets what? They're not in NATO now. It's like that's a great prize. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
The wheat fields.
Yeah.
And that was the other thing. I thought
that mud is full of 4 million landmines now, or whatever the number is now. But they've been putting landmines everywhere. It's one of the other reasons they haven't been able to move, because both sides are mining the shit out of that ground. It's like North Korea. I mean, are we gonna have another DMZ for 70 years? It's so stupid.
I wonder if I got to look that up, where Ukraine stands as far as most landmines in a nation. Afghanistan was number 1. Cambodia was number 2. So I'm wondering where Ukraine now sits on that.
We may not know until it's over.
Well, it's the other thing. How many? I want to know is how many tanks does Russia actually have? So I got this YouTube channel I've been following that kind of keeps track of armor moving out of Russia. And they have these bunkers and these campus. I'm gonna call them campuses. I don't know what you want to call it, but there's these places like where they store
depots, underground depots.
yeah, thank you. They have depots of God only knows how many fucking tanks this country actually has, man. It's probably an obscene number that we'll never that we probably can't
Well,
quantify.
yeah, Lance was saying that on my show last time. That could be true, but it also could be propaganda. We don't. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to know exactly, and we don't know what type of tanks they are. Are they capable? Are they any good?
Whatever came before the T-72, I think is what it is, like T-64.
I don't know. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
just
I think it's like it's old. It's mostly 60s and 70s, and fucking
Interesting.
tanks like that. So yeah, where's the T-90? Where I thought the T-90 was supposed to be like the greatest tank ever. Where I had barely seen it
I
on
kept
the
hearing that
battlefield.
they're hiding them because they don't want to show the world how not good they are. So
What,
'cause they
India's not
sell
going to
them.
buy them?
They sell them, and it's this big thing, like for Russia to sell these weapons, um, kind of like their nuclear reactors. It's a business, and their nuclear business, I think, was doing okay, and as was their arms exports. But when they're coming up against modern opponents, I'm not so sure. We'll see.
Well, one reason why you don't see the AK-47 or its derivatives used on the Ukrainian side of things now more than like the first year of the war is because, well, who makes the cartilage for those guns? Russia. I mean,
Okay.
they can make it themselves and stuff, but obviously the biggest producers are in Russia's sphere of influence. So that's why you see a lot more of Western weaponry, because Ukraine's stockpile is mostly leftovers from when they were, an appendage to Russia.
Okay, so you're saying they can't get resupplied basically for their
Right.
ammunition, so they have to got it. Okay.
Yeah, that was a big reason why we started funding them, because most of their shit was all fucking Soviet leftovers.
Well, to be honest, I think the decision to rely upon foreign aid for your military hardware is probably the only choice Ukraine can make, because if you set up domestic production, it'll just get destroyed by the Russians. It's so
Right.
close, so you have to kind of keep it removed. And Russia's so big that they can do that. They can build whatever they need, quote unquote, internally, even though it's like 2,000 kilometers away from the battle line. I mean, it's such a big country.
Well,
Um,
what about I don't know enough about Russia's economy. I was trying to do a little research on it recently. Again, some things I learned a lot about, and other things I just like get the cliff notes and move on with my day.
yeah.
I was looking up like hyperinflation, and there was a currency crisis in Russia in like the late 90s with the
Okay.
ruble.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Well, they had a crisis. That's true. I don't know about hyperinflation, but they probably had some inflation. They basically defaulted on their foreign loans in '98,
yes,
and
that's what I was
the,
learning
the
about
the
that.
value of the ruble went down after that, because people were basically like, well, you guys aren't trustworthy, and we can't keep our assets there, and so the relative value of it went down compared to something quote unquote safe. So yeah,
Well, there was,
but
what
that's
I
all
was
I know.
reading though is that they relied the Russia's economy, and to this day for that matter, relies heavily on bartering, not necessarily trading,
Really?
money
Okay.
for goods. And I thought that was
Okay.
interesting because that was the case with the war in Vietnam was more heavily on bartering and not
Okay.
using currency. And I'm wondering if that seems to be what is like kind of keeps Russia afloat, is more just this whole barter system,
Well, it was
bartering
like
like
that during the
corn.
Soviet days. Like it really was. Like you knew somebody at the shoe factory who could get you that left foot shoe instead of two right foot shoes. It was kind of like a joke. Like you would basically like do all these like black market deals and finally find what you're looking for. But yeah, I'm sure some of that's carried forward from those days. I think a lot of that might have something to do with the sanctions, but I think that's more of a recent thing. I think they were pretty well integrated prior to the war. So
What with
it's
the
interesting.
McDonald's theory, whatever
Well,
it's
I don't know what the McDonald's theory is, but it's just they could get iPhones, they could get Visa
right.
cards and all this junk that everybody else has. But nowadays they have to create their own.
Yeah, but how
Which
do you?
big
And
deal.
again, I'm being theoretical. I don't know enough about it, but like, how do you fight an adversary who doesn't necessarily use currency and just trade? Just based on, oh, you got a
Uh,
computer, I got a car. You want to make a deal, like,
well, don't you think that if your adversary is doing that, you're at an advantage if you do have currency? I mean, I think barter is extremely inefficient. It's like look around your residence. I mean, the things in your house came from very far away, and the odds of trading whatever you've got in your house for whatever you need to get into your house is pretty low that you could find the
right,
manufacturer and they'll accept, your Chinese food chopsticks that you left in the drawer for your flat screen TV. I mean, that's what barter is. It's like you have to like take
right.
something you have and get something you want. It's pretty hard. So specialization enabled with currency allows more productivity. So I think anybody who's in a bartering state is in a pretty bad economic state. Now, Vietnamese, I mean, they had home turf advantage. They also had, will to power, which means a lot. And
Yeah,
they were fighting against a sort of hamstrung military that had a bunch of liberals like crippling them back home and destroying the will to power, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, these all things like, like you can look at it like a ledger. It's like, okay, you've got, okay, plus column for the U.S. military, a lot of horsepower, a lot of technology, a lot of people. Negatives, no real understanding of why we're here, really far away, blah, blah, blah. That adds up to something. That's a number somewhere. And then the Vietnamese, okay, plus we're here. We don't, and then number two, we can hide. We can pretend we're, just villagers instead of the Viet Cong, et cetera. We're backed by Russia, so we don't have to actually make our stuff here. We have this border that we're, using to cross every day, but the Americans can't bomb
yeah. They
where
don't
we're getting
attack,
our
right?
stuff. There's all these things, right? And it's not like one thing versus one thing on the other side. It's like they all matter. That's what makes wars complicated, right?
I,
So I don't know.
I don't. It's again. This could drag out. I don't see it coming to an end anytime soon. In a nutshell, like
Yeah,
I
hard to
look at the
say.
cliff notes, and there's some YouTube channels that give you a blow by blow account on what town was taken, what town was lost, but Ukraine is just being like it's going to be a vacuum. It's like there's just no one going to be there. I mean, I feel
Right.
bad for the neighboring countries just being taken in all these Ukrainians. It's
Yeah.
like how does that do? What does that do to local economies in Poland or Slovenia and places like that? I don't know. You know,
Well, I mean, it depends on like who's going there. If it's a well-educated engineer who shows up in another country, that's probably going to be a boost. But if it's a criminal, that's probably not going to help.
well, the only people
It's
that are
like,
going to be left in Ukraine are going to be like toddlers and elderly people.
I don't know, man. Yeah, I agree with you. It may take a long time, but these things can change quickly. I think a lot of it comes from the leaders who are making the decisions, and if there are different leaders, this can go right back
Well,
to something else.
if you want to
So
get into the whole, our president who wears the pens, and there's Trump who can't leave the state of New York because of a criminal trial because of a
mhm.
porn star. It definitely doesn't have the same steam as Trump does. Trump does not have the same steam going into this
Yeah,
as he did in 2016, and just listening to his son-in-law talk about how Gaza is primed for real estate development, and just how intertwined this presidential election is.
did he
It's one.
actually say that? That's so
Yeah, he did.
disgusting. That's so
Totally said it.
disgusting.
I heard the clip. He certainly did say that, and
What a moron! Like, why would you even say? What do you gain from that? It's stupid.
he's just not thinking. It's kind of like with the whole Gaza thing. They just passed this what is it, hate speech bill or something, and it was like totally like everyone was on board. Both the Republicans put it forward, and everyone signed on board for it. And meanwhile, it totally is the opposite of the First Amendment. Like, I'm
Well,
kind of
okay.
like it wants to hear about.
First of all, U.S. Congress and Washington D.C. are not American. Those people are from another sector of the world that has nothing to do with Americans. So,
Right.
yeah, when they pass laws, I'm like, oh God, no, please.
Yeah, but
So,
I don't know. It was like it's like literally a throwaway bill. Like, how are you supposed to, like, if someone criticizes Jewish power and they're actually saying they're in power, what are you supposed to do? Like, I don't understand it. I don't understand, why would you even put that forth? Is that is that like a virtue signal to let you know I'm still down with your cause? I'm not listening to AOC and her cohort. Like, I don't.
I think you're overanalyzing it. I think you're correct, and there's like a hypocrisy to the whole thing. Like they're saying we don't have power, but we're using our power to enact your inability to notice that we have power. Like, I mean, do you think most of these student protesters care about that? Like they don't think that hard about this stuff. It's just they just want this to go away. They don't want criticism. It's simple, and so they're not analyzing it like this. And frankly, the people in Washington are not that smart. I mean, they're not stupid, but it's like I think you're projecting, how we on the disaffected internet talk. It's like normies don't talk like this. Like they listen to their news programs and then they regurgitate it. It's usually not that sophisticated.
So let me tell you. So in New York, when this whole situation unfolded, they posted all these signs of missing. Bring them home. Um, what do you want to call it when they stick them on the flyers? There's flyers all over the place. They're not up anymore. But when it first happened, these flyers were all over New York City. Bring them home. Bring our children. Bring this person home. Bring that person home. And I was like, okay. And I'm looking at these photos, and I like the website thispersondoesn'texist.com. Do you know this website?
No.
Okay, so if you go to thispersondoesn'texist.com, the AI generates an image of someone who doesn't exist.
Oh,
So
okay.
every time you click it and refresh, it sends you a photo of a person who's not real. Very creepy.
Huh.
So when I'm looking at these flyers and I'm like, this looks like thispersondoesn'texist.com, because I can tell by how it's pixelated when it seems a little off, like a little skewed. So then I started looking up the people that are missing. There's like no real record of this person anywhere on the internet. I
Wow.
found a couple like LinkedIn profiles that only had like 5 people following it. A Facebook page that looks like it was just made like a couple months prior to this person going missing. So, like,
This is creepy, dude. I'm looking at this. It's this person does not exist. Not
this.
doesn't exist.
Thank you.
Yeah. This is very
Yeah.
creepy.
Be careful. If you keep hitting it too much, it starts to cause errors in the algorithms or whatever, and they start to look demonic. So just a little warning ahead of time.
I'm not sure that's an accident, but
Yeah,
yeah.
dude, you can look up if this person does not exist, like demon or something. It's a Google search, and you go to
Oh my
images, you'll see
God.
all the errors. It's so like disturbing, like
Okay, but
freakish.
your point is that what, like these
I don't think
protests have like
the people
deep
that are
fakes
air
or
quote
something?
missing, the hostages, I don't think they're real.
Okay, I mean, maybe I have no idea, but
I mean,
it's
again, I'm theorizing here, but like we have to save the hostages. Well, where are the hostages? Where's the videos of the
who's
hostages?
talking like that? Like first of all, I don't live in a big city, so I don't know what normal quote unquote people are talking about. Most people where I live are focused on is just like, feeding their family. But like, is this online? Like, who's talking about the
No, it's
hostages?
flyers. There's
Flyers.
flyers
Yeah, in
all
New York.
plastered around
Okay,
Manhattan in the
okay,
boroughs of
got
the
it.
people that are air quote missing in Israel.
Yeah. Well, no one
that
cares
that
except the people putting that up.
that Hamas took hostage during October
This is
7th.
not 1979 when the Iranians took the hostages in Tehran, right? I mean, this is a fractured country, and these people aren't even American. So it's kind of funny to watch this play out because I think the Jewish bag of tricks are not really working too well. It's quite refreshing, but
Well,
I
what's interesting. So you see people waving Israeli flags in New York City, and now you have a whole other swath of people waving Palestine flags, like out of their cars and shit, with bumper stickers about Zionism and fuck Israel, defund U.S. government, from people that would be on the peripheral left of the spectrum. So it's weird how like these things start to intersect with one another, like these lines get crossed where you created this demon uh, that let's say Jewish power created the far left and stuff, and now it's kind of like blowback in your
Mhm.
face because you're all about anti-war and stuff and decolonizing. You know,
Mhm. I don't know, man. It's just you live in interesting times, I guess. Keeps getting weirder.
well, you had some guy from U.S. House of Representatives wearing an Israeli military uniform to Congress, which I thought
Oh
was
God, I know. I
crazy.
mean, I don't really follow this that much because I think they're all just demon worshippers. But at this point, but it's like um the scene of Congress like waving the Ukrainian flags was the last thing I saw, which was like, nobody gives a shit about actually the people in the country that this stupid capital city is sitting in. But yeah, the Israeli guy, I didn't catch that. That's quite jarring. Yeah, I guess to
I'm
somebody
trying
who's
to
not
see
used
if
to
I
it.
have a screenshot of it, but oh yeah, here he is. Representative Brian Mast is wearing his IDF uniform for the GOP conference meeting today.
Mm,
So it
okay.
wasn't in Congress, but it was some
Well,
GOP
I
gathering.
say more power to him because I think they had armbands last time they had a problem with these people, and that's not allowed. But if they just want to wear their whole outfit, hey, I, I don't care.
Well, don't you think like
Helps.
so like obviously the protesters would vote Democrat. I don't know how this would play out as far as the election goes. Like all these kids out there protesting Biden or the federal government's reaction to this. The only thing they can do is, uh, I guess, drop airlift food to the Palestinians. I don't know if you caught any of that also about us, whatever, flying and parachuting food into Gaza, and some of the
Mm,
parachutes didn't open, killing people who were getting the food.
jeez, that's sad. I shouldn't laugh, but it's just
It was so bad. There's videos. They're on the beach, like on the beachfront of Gaza, and the the
who's
the
flying the
food's
plane?
landing. Crates of food are landing like
This
in the
is
water on the
U.S.
where the
Air
waves
Force.
break, and people are running to try to get it, and then just get boom, just get blasted.
Who's dropping
U.S.
the Okay, but like, is it like an NGO or is it the military or what?
military.
Wow, really? I didn't know
Yep.
that. Okay, interesting. Interesting.
So, like, it's just like, okay, we're arming and giving money, billions of dollars to Israel, and then here's here we're
Right.
gonna give you a scooter pie and some MREs and Gatorade. That's what we're giving you, and it's crazy.
That's pretty terrible. What do you do? I don't know. Vote. What's gonna change this? Complain harder? Like I don't know, man. I figure just we're just not in power, and so it's just gonna keep going like this clown car that we've been driving in for our entire lives. And you can do a shoulder roll out the window if you want, and do your own thing. That's kind of what I've been doing, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not getting on this stupid bullshit train. Like it's crazy. I would like to see the border fixed, but even if it was, like, there's so much damage that's been done to the country from this going on for so long. Um, do you really think any of these people in Washington are going to deport like 40 million people? I mean, it's certainly possible. I mean, like technically speaking, but I doubt it'll happen. I could be wrong. But I mean, we saw this movie before. It's like, Trump's like, oh, we're going to get Mexico to build the wall. And that didn't even happen with
He's not
US
even. I don't
dollars.
even think
It's
he's really
like,
even talking about what's his platform this go around. It's
I
more
heard
about this
him.
trial.
I heard him unintentionally because somebody I was having to work with for something was playing it, and it's just like, and then he's like,
Right.
Joe Biden, he's like talking like he talks. He just makes it up. I mean, he doesn't even
Yep.
have a script. It's like, who goes to these rallies? He doesn't say anything original. Oh, well, when I was in charge, Iran didn't get $1, but now they get the money, and now they would. If I was back in president, they wouldn't get any money to spend on Hamas and blah blah blah. And I'm like, I don't care, dude. Fix the border. Do what you said you were going
Do
to
something
do
about the fentanyl.
8 years ago.
Crank, I think, is the new drug. And have you seen videos out of
No,
Philadelphia? Like,
I
it's
don't know.
terrible. Like, what? I don't know what happened
I
over
can't
there.
tell what city I'm looking at now. It's everywhere. So yeah, maybe.
What
I saw
can we
some
do? What about
video.
fentanyl, dude? Can we like stop bringing the fentanyl in? Like, where's it coming from?
I don't know.
Like we care. It's like we're caring about everyone else's shit but our own. And
Yeah,
no,
Trump is a big disappointment. I'm not really optimistic if he gets reelected because
what happened on January 6th, Trump? Can we talk
he
about
won't
that?
even acknowledge it. He's such a God damn
I
it.
know.
That guy is a narcissist. He doesn't care about anybody else. It's really disgusting. Um, it's really disgusting. Say what you will about Vivek, but he would actually talk about that. Like what
That's
happened to
true. Yeah, the Pajit. He actually did talk about that shit.
Right. Like, yeah. What does that say about Americans, right? That we have to get some guy from
He's on our side. You see it.
No, I'm not even knocking Vivek. I'm just saying, like, the fact that like we can't even get our own people to talk about these things, and it's some guy from some God knows village in India that is bringing up the plight of white Americans. And I know that like a lot of white Americans don't care about this stuff either because you can just see what they write on Facebook and whatever. They're calling for really, really terrible things to be done to their fellow citizens for basically walking through the Capitol building wearing a goofy hat. It's like, okay, bro.
It was an insurrection.
Keep outraging.
You try talking to a liberal white woman about January 6th. They will have they will
bring
have
it
a
up. I never
meltdown.
bring it up, but it's insufferable every single time I hear it. It's like they think that it's like a movie. I mean, they live on their smartphones anyway, but it's bad. I don't engage people on this stuff. You talk to them? You talk to them about this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I deal with them on a
You deal.
casual basis.
Yeah.
But I'm just sarcastic as possible. People died. They were gonna overthrow the government. I just do all that stupid shit.
Yeah, that might be a good way to do it. But I
They didn't even knock down a velvet rope. They didn't. It was a Norm Macdonald. It was the one who pointed that. It was so violent that they knocked down a velvet rope. They did. If you ever watch them walking in between the velvet rope to go do a bunch of selfies, and
I know there's footage of them like they're like talking to the police. Is it okay if we go over here?
Right?
Like, yeah. They're like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's fine.
Just showing you around, like, oh, come this way.
They're asking for permission. It's like, oh man.
Look, and to your point, if you stay on the internet too long, you get lost in a lot of this type of shit. And I haven't really, I've been too busy in my own life to really pay that much attention as much as I used to. I've been just more or less reading books and just getting
Well,
out, just
look,
getting
there's
outside.
good stuff going on. I mean, it's not like you can't find helpful things. I mean, I think the technology, if you think it's bad, okay, it's like, okay, that's not going to help you. But I think it's fascinating what's going on with artificial intelligence. I think it's fascinating what Musk is doing, basically. I think it's fascinating to
You a
watch.
Musk fanboy, bruh?
Uh,
No,
okay,
I'm joking
sure,
around.
sure.
I'm just
Show me
fucking
somebody
around.
better. It's
No, you're 100% right. Yeah, no,
So I think those are all cool, like the electrification, the energy transition. It's always fun to watch, what's going on in the economy, what new companies are coming up. I mean, it's sad that like in the back of my mind, I know that like the undergirding of that like amazing system that was built over hundreds of years is slowly being eroded, and your CNBC anchor is never going to talk about these issues. Those are important issues that we've talked about ad nauseum, but um, if you can't do anything about it, it's really kind of spinning your wheels. And so I think that the best thing we can do is really understand how to get ahead in life, and then if you do have enough people and enough money and enough power, then you can start affecting change. But it's not an easy thing to do without those ingredients. So my main focus is really just trying to get ahead, and I'm still doing this, still doing our show. I mean, it's important, but I try to do shows that are about topics that are helpful and relevant, and not just yet again another
black
exposition
pilling.
of how unfair things are. I think that's helpful to a point, but yeah, it gets really counterproductive pretty quickly.
I find doing these shows as, or at least in the past, cathartic because it's not like
Right. That's
I can
that's that's the
share.
main benefit of it.
Yeah,
And it's also a way to organize. I mean, it really does bring together people who are sincere and passionate about this stuff, because how could you not be sincere and passionate about this stuff? Because you take a lot of risk by being involved in these types of discussions. So unless you're, trying to infiltrate, but I mean, the people that are doing it because they care, like going back to that concept, and they're doing it with the hope that things will get better. But I think we all were unfortunately a little naive when Trump was saying the things he said, and he couldn't deliver. I don't blame him for all that. Obviously, he was up against a huge machine that tried to destroy him and continues to. But it's very naive to think that this 70-year-old, now 80-year-old man is going to solve all your problems. It
right.
always is. To think that a politician of a country of hundreds of millions of people is going to help you, it's stupid, actually. So the
Don't
amount
tell
of
that to Boomer.
time. Say what?
Don't tell that to a Boomer.
No, it's multi-generational. I think that's you maybe like, if what I understand is what you mean, is that the older generations had more faith and have more faith in the system as being naive. I think that's true today, but I think when they were growing up, it was more responsive to them. But it really just isn't today
But
for our
I
generation.
usually any like Trump supporter, I'm like, yeah, but wasn't the last election stolen? So what happened about that? And then you just see the look on their face. I'm like, and I just walk away. I'm like, yeah, that's right. It's like the election. Yeah, whether I think it obviously was.
I
We
agree,
can't
but
really.
I just heard an earful from some awful, affluent white female liberal woman explain to me how, it's always the Republicans who are committing fraud. And I'm like, okay, you're looking at certain sources. I'm curious to
All
hear what
right,
those are.
yes.
She
Good
never
luck with
gave me
that.
she never gave me
There's
the
the
sources.
vibrator.
But,
There's the
um,
puppy chow. I'll see you
yeah,
later.
but- yeah, right. But
Don't worry,
no, it was a
Your
conversation I
Vanguard
didn't have.
ETF is going to save you. Okay, that's what's
I didn't have
gonna.
a choice with this conversation, unfortunately. But I avoid them if I can. It's pretty pointless. But what was interesting to me was that they really are in a different, like, parallel universe. Like they
Yes.
really believe what they're saying. And I mean, you kind of, would hope have to believe it. I think that's better than them just like lying, but it's pretty frightening to see how divided, frankly, our understanding of reality is. Like, and I go back and forth between, well, there's an objective truth, but subjective understanding of it. But I do think that's sort of true. It's like the truth is the truth, but we don't know if we know what it is. That's kind of how I approach things. It's like something is true, but we have flawed sensors in our eyeballs and our ears. Our memories certainly are flawed. So we will have a muddled version of whatever actually happened, no matter what. But to see how like divergent it is today, based on whatever the social media feed is and whatnot, it's scary. And you talk about that weird website you just talked about, like this is not a real person. Like, look how far now you could like push that with this technology. So what does that mean?
And that's what's available free to you.
Right, exactly. That's not like what the Langley people have. I mean, like this stuff is super sophisticated stuff that's for free. So you can only imagine what facial recognition.
Google Maps is another one that I'm just fascinated by. I'm like, man, look, I can see this from a satellite image, drop a little dude and see a street view. God only knows what I'm not allowed to see, what they're capable of doing.
Yeah, it's true, man.
Well, listen, we'll wrap it up there. I really appreciate having a chat with you. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, enjoyed it.
It went in all the directions I wanted it to, so it was great, man.
Yeah, thank you for continuing to do this. I think that's the main thing I should thank you for. I think there's a lot of people who get disillusioned or bored or whatever, or they don't have time. It's a lot of work, and I think it's important. And I think that there is a certain momentum when you have a show that's already been going for a while that you can kind of easily take for granted. So if you stopped, for 10 years and then tried to come back, it's probably be a little harder. So,
well, this past year's been hard. This past year's been hard doing it, and finding people to do it with me. Like, I'm not gonna start emailing 10, 20 different people asking if they want to come on, because that takes work into itself. So if I'm able to get a group of guys to shoot the shit, I still want to do that book review. I remember we were talking about doing a show on Vietnam. Because that's something I would love to just dive into more of a historical. It's something historical is more in my wheelhouse. That's something I would really like to just get into, and that's something I enjoyed when I was a child, was reading history books, military conflicts, biography, so on and so forth. So that I would really like to get it going in that direction. But again, it's hard to get everyone on the same page.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a very complex topic that I'm by no means an expert in. So I think you would want to get, a fair group of people who can like split the work up, So
yeah, that's what exactly. If everyone's coming at it from different angles on one topic, it's a lot more fun. But again, finding those people, making time, it's a lot. And again, I'm doing this. I'm not doing this for money. I'm just doing it for my own amusement. And again, I really appreciate you coming on. I'm always have and always will be a big fan of yours, Adam.
Well, thanks. Likewise. Are you on Twitter or X or whatever it's called? Oh, okay.
You can find me on Telegram. I got like 20 followers in the MGTOW chats groups.
Okay.
I'll invite you if you want to join the group. It's just guys just shooting memes back and forth, more or less.
Okay. Yeah. If you want me to promote the show, just send me a link or something. If you wouldn't mind.
I'll send you a copy if you'd like, for your own archive.
Okay, sure. Link is. I mean, I'm assuming you're putting this up.
So do what you will. I'll send you a link. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, that's perfect. All
right. Well, listen. You have a great night. I'll catch you on the flip side.
Okay. All right.
Take care, man. Good night.
All right. Good night. Bye.